Hey guys, tonight we're going full medieval. You're a knight in a stone fortress, tucked deep in the countryside somewhere between nowhere and nowhere else, and winter has arrived with the subtlety of a trebuchet. The winds scream through the arrow slits, snow piles high against the outer walls, and everything you touch seems to bite your fingers with cold. You've survived the battlefield, political intrigue, and that one time your squire put your chainmail in the wrong order. But this might be the end. Because tonight, you have to sleep in a medieval castle, in January, and you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are, and what city are you tuning in from? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journeys together. The first thing you notice as you step into your new bedchamber, and we're using that term generously, is the sheer hostility of the space. The walls are stone, damp with the ghost of yesterday's frown. There's a small window, a vertical slit in the wall, technically called an arrow loop, but it might as well be called nature's AC unit. It doesn't have glass, obviously. Glass windows are for cathedrals and Italian merchants, not your grim defensive hovel of a castle. The cold hits you like a mace to the chest. It's not just cold, it's the kind of cold that makes you feel like your soul is frosting over. There's a fire, yes, sputtering weakly in a hearth that's more symbolic than practical. It crackles with the desperation of a half-burnt log, its heat immediately swallowed by the vast open space around you. You shuffle forward, boots scraping over uneven flagstones, each one colder than betrayal. Your bed. Ah, yes, the bed. Don't picture anything plush. It's a wooden frame, creaking already as if protesting your very existence. Across the slats are ropes strung like a bad idea. On top of that sits a straw mattress, stuffed full of who knows what and crawling with things you try very hard not to think about. Mice, fleas, a goblin with seasonal allergies. It's all fair game in a castle built for war, not comfort. There's a thick wool blanket tossed over the mattress. Thick, meaning it hasn't disintegrated yet. On top of that, some furs. They smell like the past and hint at a bear that really didn't want to be part of your sleep story. When you lie down, the mattress crunches in a way that suggests this straw is older than your sword. Your breath clouds in front of you like a phantom, and even with your tunic, leggings, underclothes, and the cloak you refuse to take off, the cold seeps in instantly. This is a castle after all, a place built not for coziness but for defence, for standing tall against sieges and storing barrels of salted fish. Not for tucking in and dreaming sweetly. Every inch of this place has a draft. The air is never still. The ceiling above you looms high and dark, wooden beams overhead stretching like skeletal fingers into the shadows. Let's take a moment to appreciate the architectural choice here. Thick stone walls, great for stopping arrows. Absolutely terrible for retaining heat. Even worse, most rooms have just one hearth, if any. Central heating, that's a future luxury. Right now, you're just hoping a rat curls up next to you for warmth. And honestly, if it doesn't bite you, you're not opposed. A strange noise echoes down the corridor. Could be the wind, could be Brother Henry whispering his evening prayers again, or possibly the sound of your own hope giving up. You lie back and stare at the ceiling beams, listening to the castle settle. Stone creaks, wood groans, and you swear you hear something skittering across the floor. It could be a rat. It could be your squire returning from the kitchen with a half-frozen onion pie. Hard to say which would be worse company. Now, historically speaking, many people in the Middle Ages didn't sleep the way we do today. There's an idea called segmented sleep, basically 2 shorter sleep periods with a wakeful hour or 2 in between. And that makes a lot more sense when you're lying here, freezing, unable to get comfortable and fully aware that your nose has gone numb. You're not even trying to get 8 hours. You're trying not to turn into a night-shaped popsicle. You shift under your pelts. The mattress wheezes, like it's in pain. You think about the fire, which by now is more ember than flame. There's no one here to tend it. That's a job for the servant you don't have tonight, because he's asleep in the stable loft, trying not to inhale hay dust. It's just you, your layers of fabric, and the bitter stone pressing silence into your bones. And yet, you begin to drift. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's the rhythmic wind moaning through the battlements. Maybe you've accepted your fate as a man cycle. But your eyes droop. For a moment you forget that there's frost forming inside your chamber door. For a heartbeat, You're not aware of the icicle above your bed that probably deserves a name at this point. Just before sleep fully claims you, there's a final thought, equal parts amusement and horror. You'll have to do this again tomorrow, every single night, through the endless months of winter, until spring comes or your bones give up. Or the Baron calls for war again, and you get to sleep in a muddy tent, which somehow might be warmer than this. You wake up somehow not frozen solid, though your toes have disappeared into a dimension of their own. The cold greets you like an old frenemy, still here, still deeply committed to ruining your comfort. The fur has shifted during the night, and one corner of your blanket has curled away, exposing a knee to the sharp air that cuts like an insult. You grunt, stiff from sleeping on what was essentially a crunchy pile of old wheat stuffed into a canvas bag. You sit up, bones clicking like a badly tuned lute, and look around the dim chamber. Your so-called bed chamber isn't even your own technically. You're just lucky enough to be high-ranking enough to sleep in a room with a door. Most of the other nights are still bunked in the dormitory-style hall above the stables, or even on the floor of the armoury if it's a full house. But even this private space doesn't feel particularly comforting. You take a moment to look around again, not much to see. A chest for your spare tunic, a rack for your boots, a table with a single candlestick bent at a strange angle like it's had a rough night too. Above the table, an iron bracket for a torch you forgot to snuff. It's left a smudge of soot on the wall that you like to imagine looks a bit like a dragon. Maybe if you squint. And then there's the most medieval part of the medieval bedroom, the floor. Made of cold, uneven stone slick with condensation that has no business being indoors. Each step you take is an exercise in either shivering or slipping. That's why you leave your boots just barely off the bed, hanging over the edge within arm's reach. Because putting cold feet into cold boots is its own form of punishment, and heaven help you if you knock them over in the dark. There's a fireplace, sort of. A narrow stone hearth built into the far wall, stained with a century of black soot. The fire that burned last night is now a yawning cavity of grey ash and half-charred wood, more decorative than useful. Last night's flames reached about 3 feet from the hearth, and your bed is at least 5 feet away. There is, and you've measured, an exact radius in which warmth simply refuses to travel. So unless you fell asleep inside the fireplace, there's no chance you got any real benefit. This architectural oversight wasn't really an oversight at the time. Castles were built for defence, not domestic bliss. Every detail, arrow slits instead of windows, thick walls to absorb catapult hits, narrow spiral staircases that favour right-handed defenders, is meant to keep enemies out, not keep heat in. So when you complain about how freezing your room is, remember, it's by design. You're not supposed to be comfortable. You're supposed to be conquerable only by siege, starvation or time. Unfortunately, cold just gets in free. Let's talk about insulation, or the lack thereof. These walls are 3 feet thick in some places, and that's good for stopping arrows, but awful for retaining warmth. There's no sealant, no caulking, just stone upon even colder stone. If you press your hand to the wall, which you do now because apparently you hate yourself, it feels like you're touching the surface of the moon. A few scraps of faded tapestry hang as half-hearted attempts at warmth. Their designs have long since faded, probably something biblical or heraldic, but now they just hang limp and dusty, their purpose symbolic at best. And don't think the ceiling's any better. Above you, wooden beams groan softly. You know from experience that sometimes when it gets really cold, frost forms up there too, and then melts, and then drips on your bed. Surprise, it's medieval air conditioning with a deeply sarcastic twist. You've actually named one of the beams Old Groany, because it creaks every time the wind changes direction, which is often. You find it oddly comforting now, in the same way one might find a haunted mirror reassuring after a few years. Even the furniture, what little there is, seems resigned to the eternal chill. The table has warped legs and a cold sheen of condensation clinging to its surface. Your chest for clothing has a lid so warped it barely closes, and inside, well, you've got a second tunic, an extra pair of wool socks, and a single moth-eaten scarf that you're irrationally protective of. That scarf has kept you just 1 degree above total despair on multiple occasions. One particularly strange and honestly fascinating historical reality is that many of these rooms, especially in older castles, were colder than the outside. Not because of the stone necessarily, but because of the way air moved through the buildings. The wind was invited in via strategic ventilation gaps, designed to reduce smoke build-up or to prevent stale air. The medieval solution to bad air was more air. which meant more freezing gusts slipping right past your door and wrapping around your ankles like judgmental ghosts. And don't expect your door to keep anything out. It's a wooden plank swollen from humidity and hanging at a slightly passive-aggressive angle on iron hinges. There's a gap beneath it big enough to let in drafts, rats, or a particularly persistent squirrel. At night, you sometimes see your candlelight flicker when someone walks past in the corridor. The wind they carry follows them in, as if even the air itself wants to see how bad your living situation is. So you huddle in the middle of your room, and try to warm yourself up. But here's the weird part. This was considered luxury. You're a knight, not a peasant. You're indoors, you have furs, you're not sleeping next to a pig for warmth, unless you count Sir Gilbert in the chamber down the hall who snores like one. Many people would have dreamed of a space like this, complete with a locking door and a fireplace that almost works. Your noble status has bought you the right to suffer slightly less than the average person, and somehow you're supposed to be grateful. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders and pull your knees up. You think of your horse in the stables below, probably warmer than you, tucked into straw and breathing in slow, contented snorts. And then you hear something, a loud clatter. Maybe a pail, maybe someone's teeth chattering hard enough to knock something over. You sigh. It's going to be a long winter. Still, you've survived one night. And that, in this drafty stone box of a castle, is no small feat. You glance toward the dim light creeping in through the arrow slit. A new day has begun. You're still cold, still tired, but you're alive. For now. Now that you're up, if we can call that stiff, resentful shamble up, it's time to examine the single most important piece of furniture in your life, the bed. Or, as you're now realizing, the awkward wooden contraption that passably resembles one. This right here is where you spend your nights praying to not become a historical footnote titled Night Popsicle, frozen by poor architecture. At first glance, your bed might almost seem romantic. A large wooden frame may be carved a little if you're important enough, posts rising up with the potential to hold curtains, if you were the type to own curtains. Most nights weren't. Those were expensive, and cloth that big was usually repurposed for, say, not dying of exposure. If you're lucky, there's a thin sheet hung to one side, meant to block drafts, but acting more like a polite suggestion to the wind. The mattress is the real experience. A sack of straw, really, maybe mixed with rushes or hay, if you're fancy. The whole thing is laid out on a net of ropes strung across the bed frame like someone tried to invent the trampoline centuries too early and gave up halfway through. Those ropes sag constantly, and every night before bed, you have to tighten them to keep from sinking into a weird hammock situation that leaves you waking up shaped like a question mark. Fun fact, that's actually where the phrase "sleep tight" comes from. Because when the ropes went loose, the sleep went bad. You're living the idiom, baby. Lying on this thing is a lesson in humility. The straw shifts under you like it's plotting. It crunches every time you move, and you swear it's getting pokier. Over time, the stuff inside breaks down, moulds, or turns into a welcome mat for all the bugs who've figured out this is the warmest spot in the room. No one tells you that you'll be sharing your sleeping space with fleas, mites, and occasionally something with antennae you refuse to identify. Congratulations, you're sleeping on nature's burrito. And let's talk about how you sleep. You don't exactly sprawl. You curl up tight, trying to conserve warmth. Most people in this time don't even sleep lying flat. That posture was often associated with death or illness. Instead, you lay on your side, knees bent, arms tucked close. It's the position of survival, not comfort. If you're extra worried about warmth, you might even sleep with a hood over your head, like you're halfway through robbing a medieval bank. The only parts of you that get exposed are your breath and the tip of your nose, which by now feels like it's about to snap off like a sad icicle. The bedding, if you can call it that, is a puzzle of layers. First comes the linen sheet, stiff and roughly spun. It's scratchier than you'd expect, especially if you're used to anything modern. On top of that is a coarse wool blanket, usually grey or brown, and thick enough to deflect mild insults. Then come the furs. Rabbit, maybe, or sheep if you're lucky. Boar's hide if you're unlucky. The kind of things that smell a little too alive to trust. You pile them on until you can't move your arms, and even then, there's always one little corner of your back exposed, letting in the cold like it paid rent. All this together doesn't make for restful sleep. It makes for strategic survival slumber. You're not relaxing. You're entering a nightly battle against hypothermia with only the barest armour. You don't have pillows, not really. You might bunch up a spare tunic or use a bag stuffed with straw or feathers. if your household hasn't eaten all the chickens. And if you think feathers or your pillows sound fancy, remember that they also attract lice. Everything is a gamble. What makes it weirder is that some folks in medieval times believed that too much softness was actually bad for you. That's right, comfort was suspicious. Too plush a bed could make you weak, sinful, or even sick. Sleeping hard was seen as virtuous, strengthening the spirit. So if you're lying there wishing for something squishier under your shoulder, just know that somewhere a monk would be deeply disappointed in your lack of abdominal fibre. One interesting fringe theory? There's some evidence that the wealthy used heated stones, bricks warmed in the fire and then wrapped in cloth to warm their beds. Not you, though. That's a noble's trick. You might try to warm the sheets by stuffing a jug of hot ale at the foot of the bed, but by the time you're ready to sleep it's barely lukewarm, and if you kick it over in your sleep, congratulations, you're now sticky and cold, a true medieval double whammy. Some households also used bed warmers, metal pans filled with embers slid between the sheets to heat things up before bedtime. It sounds clever until you realise these were often the cause of house fires, because what do you not want to put inside your flammable straw bed? Open flame. But hey, medieval life was about trade-offs. Warm toes or a burned-down keep? Roll the dice. Scholars still debate exactly how comfortable these sleeping arrangements were, and would suggest that people adapted more than we give them credit for. That over time, they simply learned to live with the cold and discomfort, building up a kind of tolerance that modern folks can't imagine. Others argue that it was miserable, full stop, and people just complained less because there weren't any better options. No one misses what they've never had, right? Well, until they lie down and hear their mattress squeal like a basket of angry straw mice. So you lie there again tonight, curled under your pelts, listening to the night creak around you. You know the mattress is slowly sagging, the rope's already loosening. There's a tiny itch at your neck, flea or fabric, you're not sure. Your nose is cold again. You can't fully stretch your legs without exposing a foot. And yet, you drift, somehow, because exhaustion is the great equalizer. At least the bed didn't catch fire. Yet. Tonight, before you even dare climb into bed, you begin the ancient nightly ritual of layering. Not armour this time, though that might honestly help, but a pile of clothing so absurd that somewhere deep in your soul you wonder if you're cosplaying as a very stylish onion. It's not about fashion. It's about not dying of exposure in your own sleeping quarters, which, as we've now established, are basically glorified stone refrigerators. You start with your linen undershirt, the one that always smells faintly of horse and wet wood. It's thin but necessary, the first line of defence against the cold, and also, let's be honest, against the itchiness of the wool that's coming next. Over that goes your woolen tunic, heavier and definitely itchier, followed by thick hose, essentially long medieval socks that reach up to your thighs and sag like they've already given up. Then come the woolen chausses, your trusty leg coverings, and of course, you can't forget your coif, a sort of hood that covers your head, neck and ears. It's like medieval earmuffs, but less cute and more like you're preparing for battle against the Arctic. Next you reach for your cloak, a thick, heavy wool number clasped at the shoulder and smelling of the great outdoors, likely because it was last worn during that unfortunate snow-covered patrol 2 weeks ago. You wrap it around yourself, overlapping the ends like you're bracing for a storm, even though the only thing coming is another draft through the floorboards. You're layered now, not for style but for survival. And no, you're not taking any of it off to sleep. Undressing would be pure folly. In fact, it's not uncommon for you to sleep in nearly the same outfit you wore all day, minus the belt and dagger. If it weren't for the faint hope of avoiding wrinkles, you might just keep your boots on too. You slide into bed like a bear into hibernation, the layers compressing beneath you. You feel like a sausage wrapped in wool, an existential dread. The bed shifts under your weight, the straw crinkling like old parchment, and you wedge yourself deeper beneath the furs. There's a particular strategy to all this. You must keep your limbs tight, your knees pulled in, and your hands either tucked into your sleeves or sandwiched between your thighs. Forget comfort. This is a cold weather chess match, and you're playing against death himself. And if you're a knight with a bit of wealth, maybe you've got a trick or two, a flask of warm, spiced wine tucked against your chest. Risky but effective. A wool-wrapped rock that was left near the hearth earlier in the evening. Delightful for the first 4 minutes. After that, it becomes a foot-shaped ice cube. You've tried it all, but tonight, you've opted for the most effective strategy of all. Multiple layers of clothing, plus a second cloak folded at your feet, ready to be pulled over your head if things get desperate. Spoiler alert, they always do. Let's not forget your hat. Yes, you wear a sleeping cap. It's not just a whimsical touch from fairy tales, it's essential. Heat escapes through your head, and without something covering it, your dreams will be chilled and your thoughts frostbitten. Your cap is hand-knit, maybe by a very kind servant who took pity on you last winter after you accidentally turned purple during prayers. You pull it low over your ears and forehead, until only your eyes and the bridge of your nose peek out. You are now a medieval burrito. But here's the kicker. No matter how many layers you pile on, you will be cold. The air inside your bedchamber is never quite still. It moves like it's looking for bare skin to harass. You can feel it snake in under the door, swirl around your shoulders, creep down your spine. It's the kind of cold that feels personal, and despite your layers, it still finds a way in. Historically, it wasn't just about personal warmth. It was about efficiency. Clothing was expensive, and if you had to choose between more blankets or more woolen garments, you chose what you could wear all day. So layering up at night wasn't a style choice. It was financial logic. Peasants would often sleep in everything they owned, which, to be fair, wasn't much. You as someone who was a knight have more than most, but you're still feeling the bite of winter in ways that silk-lined nobles could only pretend to imagine. There's even a school of thought, yes, a real historical debate, that suggests people actually slept better when bundled up like this. Something about the weight of all those garments and furs creating a sense of security. That's cute, but it doesn't account for the part where your layers twist and bunch during the night, making you feel like you're being slowly strangled by your own clothes. You wake up at least twice trying to untangle your left leg from your right sleeve, wondering how this became your life, and you have to plan carefully. Layer wrong and you'll sweat, which will then chill, and you'll wake up soaking and freezing. Layer too lightly, and the cold will work its way through before midnight. There's an art to it, a tactical, deeply unglamorous art. But when done right, you might just make it through the night with all your fingers. Also, you're not the only one relying on layers. Your squire, who sleeps in the corridor outside your door like an underpaid dog, has turned layering into a competitive sport. You've seen him crawl out from a pile of 4 tunics, a cape, a woolen blanket stolen from the chapel, and what you're pretty sure is part of a curtain from the Great Hall. He survives. He shivers, but he survives. And so, layered and lumpy, you lay still, trying not to let cold air sneak in between your garments. Every time you shift, there's a rustling. A tug, a creak. You try not to move. You try not to breathe too much. You try to fall asleep imagining warm things, bonfires, summer hunts, being boiled alive in oil. Anything remotely toasty. Eventually, sleep comes, not as a sweet embrace, but as a slow surrender. You drift, still dressed like you're ready for war, furs tangled, cloak halfway up your face. You've made it through another night without freezing, or at least you've layered enough that no one will know if you did until morning. The fire is still smouldering when you stir, sending up a lazy curl of smoke that smells like damp wood and last night's disappointment. You don't even open your eyes right away. You don't need to. The cold is already working its way back in. It doesn't knock anymore. It just enters your bones uninvited. You're awake. You're wrapped like a discarded rug in your own clothing and furs, and the part of your brain that still hopes for warmth whimpers quietly in the corner. You turn your head slightly and squint toward the fireplace. Let's talk about this little stone arch of false promises. You might assume that a roaring hearth in a stone room would transform the place into a toasty haven, right? That's adorable. The reality is much more medieval. First off, the hearth is small. Most sleeping chambers had no fireplaces at all. If you've got one in your room, it's because someone once thought you were important, or because a noble guest died in this bed a century ago, and they retrofitted it in his honour. But even then, the fire's reach is tragically limited. Here's the thing about fires in castles. They don't want to help you. They exist mostly to look pretty and to give you a false sense of control. The flames never quite get big enough unless someone tends them constantly, which isn't your job and definitely not your squire's. He's still asleep, probably wrapped around the dog in the corridor. Even if the fire is blazing, the heat rises immediately and pools up near the ceiling where no one lives except cobwebs and the occasional suicidal bat. The stone walls around the hearth, they act like a vacuum for warmth. They suck up the heat faster than you can generate it. You can sit beside the fire, practically hugging it, and still feel like your back is in a different time zone. At night, when no one feeds the flames, they die down to red coals within an hour, maybe 2 if you stack them well, but you didn't. You were too busy trying to warm your socks over the embers and nearly set your foot on fire. It gets worse when you realise the chimney is stealing your body heat. Yes, your chimney, the very thing meant to carry smoke away, is also a wind tunnel straight into the atmosphere. Some of them were built too wide, letting cold air rush in as easily as the smoke goes out. And in many rooms, there's no damper to close the flue when the fire's out. Why? Because dampers hadn't been invented yet. Or at least they hadn't reached your little corner of cold, damp Europe. So while the fire might warm your fingers for a moment, it also sucks the warmth from the rest of the room like a reverse blessing. Scholars argue over whether fireplaces were common in all private rooms or just for nobles. Some think that most rooms had brazier bowls or simple stone fire pits, which were cheaper and easier to manage. Others point out that even if a hearth was present, it didn't guarantee fuel. Wood was expensive, charcoal even more so. If the household budget was tight, the fires in personal chambers were the first thing to be cut. Heat was a luxury, and your comfort was not on the estate's priority list. And let's not forget the risks. Fires were dangerous. Most of your world is flammable. The straw in your mattress, your clothing, the tapestries, even the wooden beams overhead. They all go up faster than you can shout, "Saints preserve us." One spark, one errant log roll, and suddenly you've got more light than you ever wanted. That's why some castle lords actually banned overnight fires in sleeping quarters. Too many beds went up like kindling, too many sleepy nights got singed or smoked out. You remember the tale, don't you? Sir Aldrich of Northmarch, famous for putting down a rebellion and for accidentally burning his own foot off in bed after he fell asleep next to a brazier. One toe at a time he cooked like a sausage. Ever since, people keep a respectful 3-foot radius between themselves and open flame, unless they're drunk. Then it's more like 3 inches and a prayer. So what's your nightly fire strategy? You light it early, let it burn as you layer up and settle in, and then watch helplessly as it dies sometime before midnight. Maybe you get up once to add another log, something noble and effortful like oak, which burns slow and hot, but that means exposing your hands to the air, fumbling with the poker, and accidentally breathing in the ash cloud that billows up like the spirit of every log you've ever burned. By the time you crawl back under your furs, the spot you left is cold again. You've achieved nothing but soot in your nose and a splinter in your thumb. Some of the truly elite have attendants who stoke the fire all night, popping in every hour to add wood and adjust the logs, but you're not that important. You've got a squire who once used your good wool socks to strain broth. You're lucky if he remembers to bring in firewood before sunset, let alone maintain it after dark. One time he added a log so big it cracked the hearthstone. Another time he forgot the flint entirely and tried to start the fire by banging your sword against the floor. You haven't let him live that down. Interestingly, there were attempts at improving fireplace design in the later Middle Ages. Some clever builders created hooded fireplaces that directed smoke better and reduced drafts. But again, only in very expensive renovations. Your castle is older, grumpier, and extremely unbothered by your desire not to freeze. Eventually, the fire becomes background, more emotional comfort than physical. You stare into it as you try to fall asleep, your face faintly warm while your backside turns to granite. When it's finally out, and the room dips several degrees colder, you lie there listening to the wind whistle down the chimney, a lonely howling reminder that nature doesn't care how many titles you have or how sharp your sword is. And still, in spite of all this, you make it through the night, because that's what nights do, you endure. You get frostbitten dreams and ash in your hair and wake up with a new appreciation for modern insulation you don't know will exist in another 600 years, and you start thinking maybe tomorrow you'll try moving your bed closer to the fire, just 2 feet. What could go wrong? It's well after midnight when you wake up for the 3rd time, convinced that a part of your body has died. You're not wrong, it's your left foot. Not literally, of course, but close enough. It's gone from numb to existentially missing. You lie there, barely moving, trying to figure out whether it's still attached or if you somehow kicked it off in your sleep. The fur blanket has shifted again, as it always does, and sliding off like it has somewhere more important to be. You sigh, reach down and drag it back over your legs. Careful not to expose too much of yourself in the process. This is the nightly dance. Cold winds, you respond, and then cold winds again. It's got a perfect record. The fur is thick, wolf maybe, or something pretending to be. You didn't ask, you just know it's heavy, smells vaguely of wet dog, and has been your most loyal companion through these relentless winter nights. It's not soft, nothing in your bed is soft. The mattress is filled with straw, your clothes are scratchy, the blanket is coarse, and your pillow is essentially a fabric sack with ambitions. But the fur, The fur is heavy, and that's the key. It's the only thing pressing down hard enough to convince your body it isn't floating in an ice bath. You shift it over your shoulders, trying to trap the last remnants of your body heat before they flee forever. You reach for your second line of defense, feathers. Somewhere under the wool fur monstrosity is a quilted blanket stuffed with feathers. Probably goose, possibly something less glamorous like duck or miscellaneous bird. It's been patched so many times it looks like a medieval tapestry about someone losing a fight with sewing. But the feathers hold heat. Not evenly, and certainly not without the occasional rogue quill jabbed in your side like it's settling a grudge. But they help. This combination of fur and feather is the standard setup for any knight lucky enough to have both. Most peasants wouldn't dream of such luxury. They sleep on rush-stuffed sacks or hay piles with maybe a linen sheet to keep the bugs out of their ears. Meanwhile, you, a trained warrior and theoretically important person, are essentially nesting in layers of animal remains and feather detritus. It's not glorious, it's not noble, but it's warmish. And that's all that matters. You curl tighter, trying to make the most of it. And suddenly you feel a sharp movement near your feet. Not a dream, not the wind, something alive. You freeze, eyes wide open now, breath caught in your throat. Then it shifts again, something small and warm burrowing into your layers. You lift the blanket slightly, just enough to glimpse a pair of glowing eyes staring back at you. It's the cat. Of course, that ragged orange terror that roams the castle halls like he owns the place. He's not yours. No one owns him. He just lives here, like a ghost with fur. He slips in through open doors, disappears through cracks in the stone, and somehow always finds the warmest place in the room. And tonight, apparently, that place is your bed. He snuggles in beside your foot, purring like a tiny furnace, and for a moment you actually feel grateful. This little beast might be your best insulation yet. You shift carefully, trying not to disturb him. He'll leave if you move too much, and you can't afford to lose that toe-saving heat. Some nights you've caught him curled on your chest or tucked into the crook of your knee. Others he brings gifts. A dead mouse on your pillow. Half a bird wing. A lizard once. You accepted them all with the dead-eyed politeness of someone who knows better than to offend the only being in the castle that seems capable of true warmth. It's not just cats, either. Dogs roam freely too. Some knights sleep with them deliberately. Especially the smaller breeds bred for warmth and loyalty. There are stories, true ones, of entire families huddling together with animals during winter. Not out of affection, but out of basic biology. Anything with a pulse becomes a potential heat source. There's even a medieval phrase, 3-dog night, meaning it's so cold you need 3 dogs in bed just to survive. You're currently operating at 1 cat and no dogs, which is risky math. As you shift again, you hear a thump from the hallway. Someone's boots landing hard on the stone. Probably a guard changing shifts. His muffled curse bounces off the walls and makes it under your door with ease. The sound reminds you you're not alone in this castle. Every chamber holds someone else curled up in their own patch of fur, facing down the cold with varying degrees of success. You picture Sir Bennet 2 doors down, probably drooling on his pelts and dreaming of roast pheasant. Or Lady Isolde upstairs, buried under imported silk blankets and probably still cold because silk, despite its drama, is absolutely useless in winter. And then there's the sound of dripping, slow, rhythmic. It's either from the ceiling beam where condensation is collecting again, or from a leaky pitcher near the hearth. You've given up trying to fix it. You've also given up on being angry about it. These little sounds are part of the room now, like the way the wind sings through the arrow slits, or the way your bed creaks every time you shift. It's not white noise, it's more like medieval noise, distant, oddly calming, and just intrusive enough to remind you that sleep is a fragile truce, not a right. One fringe theory you've heard whispered among the older knights is that furs from specific animals hold better warmth. Bear, for instance, is considered the pinnacle, heavy, thick, and intimidating. The catch? You have to kill the bear, and not many people survive that transaction. Beaver pelts are prized too for their dense undercoat, but again, not something just lying around. Most of your castle's furs are rabbit, fox, or goat. Affordable, effective, occasionally lumpy. What historians still debate is how people ranked these materials. Was a fox fur more prestigious than a woven wool blanket? Did owning a feather-stuffed quilt signal wealth, or just better connections to the village bird catcher? It's one of those things we'll probably never fully know. because the medieval records cared a lot about who owned land and very little about who had the fluffiest blanket. Typical. The cat sighs, a little puff of breath against your ankle, and you realise you've been warm for almost 5 minutes. That might be a personal record. You settle deeper into the bed, grateful for the added weight at your feet, for the furs, for the feathers, for the strange ecosystem of survival tools your ancestors assembled just to make it through the night without shattering into frozen pieces. You don't sleep well. No one really does. But you sleep enough. And in the medieval world, enough is practically luxury. Eventually it hits you. That moment where comfort and sleep are winning, your body finally beginning to surrender, when suddenly your bladder speaks up with a betrayal. It's urgent. It's undeniable. And it's happening right now in the worst possible conditions. You lie still for a few seconds, eyes closed, trying to negotiate with your organs. Maybe you can hold it. Maybe your body is bluffing. But no, the pressure is real. The cold has woken every part of you, and now medieval biology is demanding action. Welcome to the least glamorous part of castle life, the night trip to the privy. You begin the slow, dreaded process of extracting yourself from the cocoon of fur, wool, feathers, and shame. The layers don't come off so much as they try to strangle you on the way out. Your cloak is tangled under your knees, your wool socks are half off and oddly damp, and your hat has rotated sideways like it's fleeing the situation. Every movement releases a new pocket of cold air, as though the bed has been quietly storing it up just to punish you. The cat, who had generously chosen your body as his personal furnace, senses the betrayal and bolts, leaping to the floor with a thump and vanishing into the dark like a judgmental ghost. You sit upright, instantly regretting everything, your breath rising in visible puffs. You swing your feet to the floor, flinching as the stone leeches heat from your soles like it's being paid. This is not just discomfort. This is warfare. Now, if you were lucky, or rich, you might have a chamber pot, glazed in ceramic or pewter bowl tucked under the bed, ready for precisely this moment. You reach beneath the frame, feeling blindly for it, praying it wasn't moved or borrowed by someone else in the castle who didn't feel like climbing a flight of stairs in the dead of night. Your hand brushes cold metal. Salvation, sort of. You pull it out and take a moment to consider your options. It's dark, your aim is questionable, and the pot is slightly chipped on one edge. But this is your best case scenario. You position yourself carefully, awkwardly crouched or sitting depending on your rank and flexibility. And yes, it's humiliating. No one wants their legacy to include piddled into a pewter bowl while wearing 4 tunics. But it's better than the alternative, walking to the actual garderobe. Because let's talk about that medieval toilet experience. The garderobe is technically a bathroom. Realistically, it's a small narrow stone closet built into the outer wall of the castle. There's a wooden bench with a hole in it, and beneath that a very long drop into a pit, or, if you're lucky, the rushing waters of the castle moat. It sounds simple, but at 2 a.m, with no light, no insulation, and a howling wind tearing through the chute beneath you, it becomes a test of survival. Leaving your room to use the garderobe means dressing again, or at least wrapping yourself in enough layers to not die on the way. It means braving the freezing hallway, dodging sleepy guards, and praying that the torch you carry doesn't blow out in the wind. It means squatting over a hole in the dark, trying not to fall in, while the night air whistles directly up into places you'd rather not discuss. Many nights avoid it entirely. In fact, the chamber pot is a medieval essential. In noble households, servants would empty them each morning, often just tossing the contents into a designated courtyard or, if you're particularly posh, carrying them to the castle's refuse chute. You don't ask too many questions about where it goes, you just hope the wind's blowing the other direction. Still, not everyone had their own chamber pot. Lower-ranking squires and servants might share one, or 2, which leads to a whole series of unspoken rules about when and how you use it. You've heard stories, disturbing ones, of young squires trying to quietly empty a pot from the battlements at night, only to be caught in the act by an angry cook on morning firewood duty. Let's just say soup was late that day. There's also the deeply unpleasant fact that chamber pots don't hide their contents well. Lids exist, yes, but the smell still seeps out like a guilty conscience. It's not overpowering, not usually, but when the air in your chamber is already stale and unmoving, even a mild funk becomes a full sensory event. You get used to it. Everyone does. The nose adapts, sort of. And here's a fun fringe detail. Some chamber pots were decorated. That's right, painted, engraved. Some even had little jokes on them. Historical humour at its finest. Imagine crouching over a bowl that reads, "For thy most noble business," in elaborate calligraphy, or one carved with the face of a rival knight. Because nothing says class warfare like urinating into Lord Geoffrey's smirking face. Scholars still debate how widely chamber pots were used in castles. Some argue that they were a noble-only luxury, while others point out that even the humbler quarters had something resembling indoor relief. The records are patchy, because unsurprisingly, no one liked writing long passages about medieval toilet habits. But archaeological digs have uncovered enough shards of ceramic pots to suggest that a wide range of folks used them, and thank the saints for that. Because your other option, let's be honest, is sprinting out into the courtyard and hoping the snowbanks are deep enough to cover both your tracks and your shame. You finish your business, awkwardly tip the pot back into place, and crawl back into bed, every square inch of you now colder than it was before. The heat you had so carefully cultivated is gone. Your layers feel untrustworthy, your furs like strangers. The cat does not return. He's offended by your nighttime priorities. But there's a small comfort in knowing that this miserable ritual is universal. Every knight, every servant, every noble guest who's ever slept in this castle has faced this same choice: chamber pot or death march to the garderobe. Most choose the pot. It's the medieval way. You curl up again, fists under your chin, knees tight to your chest. The bed creaks, the wind howls through the arrow slit. Somewhere faintly a guard sneezes and swears at the cold, and as your eyes finally start to droop again, you silently vow to drink less meat tomorrow night. The castle wakes long before you do, not in the cheerful birdsong way of fairy tales, but with the dull clang of someone dropping a bucket in the inner courtyard, followed by a chorus of boots scraping across stone, and one overly enthusiastic rooster who lives under the impression he's king of the battlements. He's not. He's just loud. You bury your face deeper into the tangled pile of blankets and cloaks, hoping that if you pretend to be dead long enough, someone else will take your place at morning prayer. But of course, no such luck. You groan and stretch, which really just means shifting 2 inches to the left and trying not to wake up the pins and needles in your right arm. You've somehow managed to sleep half on, half off your straw mattress, twisted into a shape resembling a broken coat of arms. Your bed protests with a series of sharp creaks, and a few feathers escape from the pillow like tiny panicked ghosts. You're sore in places that shouldn't even be sore. Your hip feels like it tried to defect during the night. Despite all that, there's a flicker of satisfaction. You made it. Another night survived. You didn't freeze solid. You didn't catch fire. You didn't fall asleep so close to the hearth that your foot turned into charcoal. That's the medieval trifecta. But before you can celebrate with some stale bread or a prayer of thanks, you remember the worst part of being a knight with his own chamber. Today you're expected to give it up. The castle's steward warned you yesterday. Lord Everard's cousin is arriving. He'll need proper lodging. And by proper, of course, they mean your room. That's how it always goes. When a noble guest arrives, every knight under the rank of lord gets shuffled around like a game of miserable human chess. It doesn't matter that you fought at Crecy. It doesn't matter that your shoulder still clicks from holding the line at Blackmoor. What matters is that Lady Sybil's son is visiting, and he needs a chamber with a fireplace and a door that closes all the way. So you sit up and look around your space with resigned affection. You'll miss this drafty stone box, the familiar creak of the floorboard near the hearth, the cat who may or may not show up later for a nap, the arrow slit that lets in the sound of the wind and the occasional bee in summer. Soon it'll belong to some awkward noble with a nasal laugh and a tendency to use your best fur as a boot mat. Rank, as it turns out, doesn't protect you from displacement. Even in the knightly class, there are layers. You're respectable, trusted, valued in battle, but you're not blood. And in this world, blood speaks louder than sword. Which means your bed, such as it is, can be reassigned whenever someone with a fancier name and a louder retinue shows up needing a place to rest his pampered head. You start packing what little you have. Not that it takes long. Your belt, your dave, your second-best tunic folded with care. You bundle them into a cloth satchel and tuck your pillow under your arm, feathers still poking out at odd angles. You'll get a new bed tonight, probably in the lesser quarters, where the fireplaces are theoretical and the walls are thin enough to hear the guards arguing about soup. But here's the thing, even in those lower chambers, some sleep better than others. Because it's not just the room that matters, it's the pecking order. Within a castle, your place in the sleeping hierarchy is its own reflection of power. Lords and barons sleep in warmth, surrounded by heavy drapes, fine linens, servants to tend their fires. Knights like you get what's left. Private chambers if you're lucky, shared dormitories if not. Squires and servants, meanwhile, curl up wherever they can, hallways, kitchens, the stable loft if they're really bold. And those shifts in lodging come with silent expectations. You don't complain when you're bumped for a guest. You don't protest when you're moved to a room with no window and a suspicious puddle that never quite dries. You carry your blankets, settle into the new space, and thank your luck that you're still indoors, that you're not out in the field, sharing a tent with 3 other men and a dog that eats better than you. Still, there's a sting to it. A reminder that your comfort is always negotiable. That even after years of service, one letter from a noble family can knock you out of bed, literally. And it's not just the nobles, high-ranking clergy get similar treatment. Once you had to give up your chamber for a visiting bishop who arrived with 2 carts worth of vestments and an attitude like he personally invented heaven. The man sweated profusely, left your pillow soaked, and insisted on eating figs in bed. You're still recovering. One of the more curious historical quirks is that some castles didn't even offer private rooms to their knights. Instead, large dormitories were the norm, rows of beds separated by thin curtains or nothing at all. Privacy was rare, snoring was guaranteed, and if you thought the cold was bad in a stone room, wait until you share the air with 20 other bodies, half of them sniffling and the other half arguing over who stole whose cloak. That's where you're likely headed now, not quite the barracks, but not far from it. The transition rooms, as they're called, places meant for overflow guests, travelling companions, and knights in temporary disgrace. You're not in disgrace, but you're not in favour either. You're just next on the list, and the list always moves. Still, you know how to make it work. You've done it before. You'll find a bed that isn't directly under a leak, stake out a corner near a brazier if you can, and maybe, if the wind's kind, you'll manage another night of sleep without losing a toe. You sling your satchel over your shoulder and glance around the room one last time. The fire is out. The bed is a mess of fur and flattened straw. The smell of smoke lingers in the air, clinging to the stone like an old ghost. You nod to it all quietly and step into the hallway. The door creaks shut behind you, and just like that, the room belongs to someone else. You're halfway down the drafty corridor, still carrying your pillow like a deflated trophy, when the unmistakable sounds of the castle's night watch echo up the spiral staircase, the clink of mail, the thud of boots, and the low rhythmic murmur of half-muttered Latin prayers. You pause, leaning against the cold stone wall, and listen. It's not that you're religious, though most people pretend to be when the steward is nearby, but the cadence of it is oddly soothing, repetitive, familiar, the sounds of men trying to stay awake by reciting the same dozen lines they learned when they were 12. You've done it yourself more times than you can count. The night watch is a necessary annoyance. Every castle keeps men on patrol from sundown to sunup, not because you expect raiders or armies every night, but because it only takes one idiot with a torch and a grudge to burn down centuries of stone and timber. And so the halls are never truly silent. Even in the deepest hours of the night, someone is always moving, shuffling along in half armour, yawning behind a spear or arguing about whose turn it is to check the east wall. For you, trying to sleep in a place like this means accepting that quiet is a lie. There's always noise, the metallic chime of chainmail brushing against itself, the echoing clang of a dropped gauntlet, the sharp bark of a dog in the courtyard, followed by the softer mutter of a guard cursing at it, and in the background, always, that low hum of wind crawling through the joints of the castle like it's inspecting for weak spots. You duck into a side hallway and follow the flickering torchlight toward your new quarters. On the way, you pass a group of young squires doing their best impression of full consciousness. One of them, clearly on the edge of sleep, is leaning on a spear backward. Another is eating something that might have once been bread. They snap to attention when they see you, offering a clumsy salute, but you wave them off. You're not here to reprimand. You're just trying to find your new nest and ignore the strange smell coming from somewhere near the south wall. And then the bells chime, not the loud toll of danger, thank the saints, but the soft triple chime that marks the 4th watch of the night, roughly 3 a.m. It's the graveyard shift, when every part of your body screams to be horizontal and every hallway starts to look like it might lead directly into purgatory. You've been on that shift yourself, pacing the ramparts while your breath clouds in front of your face, your boots stiff with frost, and your mind half dreaming of warm stew and a bed you'll never see again. The night watch is a purgatory of its own, a liminal state between duty and exhaustion. You finally reach your new quarters, a generously labelled Transitional Night's Chamber, which in plain speech means temporary misery box. The door creaks when you open it, revealing a narrow space just big enough for a bed, a stool, and a slanted wash basin that someone definitely threw up in last week. You don't ask questions, you just step inside, shut the door behind you and exhale. The bed is smaller than your old one, and somehow sadder. The straw mattress is visibly flattened in the middle, like someone recently lost an emotional battle on it. There's no fireplace, but someone's tried to be kind. A tiny iron brazier sits in the corner with a faint glow of embers still alive inside. It's not much, but you kneel beside it like it's an old friend and give it a few soft puffs of air. A spark flickers, a little flame curls up from the charcoal, uncertain and shy. It's like convincing a toddler to stand in front of strangers, but eventually it warms just enough for you to feel your fingertips again. You hear the watch passing outside, the low murmur of a psalm, the familiar footfalls, a cough that sounds distinctly plague-adjacent. You try not to think about that. Instead, you arrange your bedding as best you can. The blanket provided is thin, probably reused more times than any of the castle's chamber pots, and the pillow is filled with something that crinkles unpleasantly. You lay your own pillow over it, reclaiming a shred of dignity. It's hard to sleep with the castle still awake. The night watch doesn't care if you're trying to get your 4 remaining hours of rest. They clump past like armoured elephants, their lanterns casting jerky shadows across the wall. One of them hums, a low, off-key tune you recognise from drinking nights in the Great Hall. It's catchy in a miserable sort of way. You close your eyes and let the noise wash over you. It's not restful, but it's familiar. The sounds of a castle alive at night, someone sharpening a blade in the forge, a distant door banging in the wind, the uneven slap of wet leather boots on stone. This is what safety sounds like, apparently. A symphony of clatter, prayers, and muttered profanity. One quirky detail you can't forget is that some castles designated a specific rotation of night monks to walk the halls and sing hourly hymns. It was supposed to ward off evil spirits, protect the soul, and remind the sleepy guards that God was always watching, even if their sergeant wasn't. You're not sure if your castle follows this tradition, but once, months ago, you swore you heard singing just before dawn. It was so soft and strange that you thought you were dreaming. But others have mentioned it too. No one admits to doing the singing. Maybe it's the monks, maybe it's just the wind playing tricks again. Scholars argue whether this constant motion, this nightly patrol and holy hum, made people feel secure or just kept them perpetually on edge. Some say the noise was a comfort, proof that someone was awake to watch over the rest. Others insist that the constant presence of guards and the distant clang of weapons only reminded everyone how not safe the world really was. Personally, you think both are true. There's comfort in knowing someone else is freezing their toes off while you pretend to sleep. But it's also a reminder that comfort is always conditional. Eventually, your body betrays you again, this time in a gentler way. Exhaustion wins. The noise fades to a background murmur. The brazier glows warmly enough. The bed is terrible, but your standards have plummeted. You shift, adjust your cloak, curl into your favoured survival pose, and let the rhythmic clang of boots lull you into that delicate sleep state reserved for warriors and people trying to nap at airports. Outside, the castle keeps moving. Inside, you finally rest. Sometime after the 4th bell and before the frost on the windows begins to sweat, you stir. Not from cold this time. Miraculously, the little brazier in the corners is still glowing faintly, but from the unmistakable smell of food. Not good food, mind you. Not the kind that makes your stomach leap and your mouth water. No, this is the medieval version of a midnight snack. Boiled onions, perhaps, or the lingering scent of salted meat from the kitchens below. It drifts up through the floorboards and into your dreams like a ghost offering leftovers. You open one eye, bleary and dry, and realise you're not dreaming. Someone is eating, somewhere very close by. You sit up, cloak sliding off your shoulder, and listen. Below your chamber, the kitchens have started early. You can hear it now, soft footfalls, the clatter of pots, muffled curse in a language you don't understand, the night cook maybe, or one of the scullions preparing the morning meal before the rest of the castle awakens. Either way, it's a reminder. Warmth and food are happening down there. while you are up here on a lumpy mattress tangled in a blanket that smells faintly of mildew and disappointment. Still, the scent is tempting. Warm broth, maybe, or last night's thick stew reheated until it bubbles like a witch's cauldron. You consider getting up. You could sneak down the servant stairs, charm a piece of bread from the cook, maybe even score a bowl of whatever's boiling if you're lucky and humble enough, but your body rebels at the thought of leaving the fragile heat bubble you've created in bed. It's still early. Too early. And besides, you know how this plays out. Every knight who's ever gone hunting for food in the dead of night has returned with wet boots, burned fingers, and a story about tripping over a dog near the pantry. So instead, you lie back and breathe it in. The smell is something, at least. It's warm, in its own strange way, and it draws your mind away from the cold. You can picture the kitchen hearth, the massive pots simmering gently, the cook's face glowing orange in the firelight. You think about food more than you should, especially during winter. It's not just hunger, it's nostalgia. A hot meal becomes a symbol of everything good: comfort, survival, even love. Which brings you to the strange medieval tradition of the midnight meal. It's not common in every household, but in some castles, especially those with wealth and ambition, the lord and his immediate circle dine again in the small hours. Not a feast, mind you, but a kind of secret meal, held by candlelight, often in the solar or upper hall. Warmed ale, cold meats, hard cheese and thick bread, sometimes dipped in honey or sprinkled with coarse salt. You've attended a few of these, usually after long meetings or late returns from hunting. The atmosphere is quieter, gentler than the raucous great hall. Candles flicker, the fire is low, and everyone speaks softer, as if the hour itself demands reverence. In these rare moments, even the lords look tired, less like rulers and more like men who've seen too many winters and not enough spring. You remember one night, long ago, when a young page fell asleep with his face in a trencher of stew. No one had the heart to wake him. Someone just draped a napkin over his shoulders and let him be. Not everyone had access to midnight meals, though. For most of the castle, food came in 2 rounds, one late in the morning, the other in the evening. Breakfasts were rare and usually liquid, beer, ale, or warmed milk if you were feeling virtuous. For the working folk, that was enough. You ate when the kitchen gave out food and not a moment before. That's why the smell drifting through the cracks in your floor right now feels both sacred and cruel. It's an echo of something you can't have, a tease. There's a fringe belief in some parts of the kingdom that eating too late at night opens you to nightmares, that the body, too focused on digesting, lets down its spiritual defences. You're not sure if you believe that, but you've definitely had some strange dreams after sneaking a cold pasty in the dark. One involved you arguing with a goose in perfect Latin. Another featured your old instructor, Sir Gautier, fighting a turnip the size of a wine barrel. So, maybe there's something to it. You roll onto your side, pulling your cloak tighter. The noise from below grows louder. More pots, more voices. Someone laughs, a rare sound in the depths of night. And then, surprisingly, the soft clink of a cup being set down on stone just outside your door. You freeze. Someone's there. You wait a beat, listening. A whisper follows. You awake in there. It's your squire. Of course, the fool probably heard your stomach growling from the corridor and took pity on you. You hear a rustle, then the scrape of something being slid under the door. Bread, flat, maybe a bit stale, but unmistakably edible. He doesn't wait for thanks. You hear his retreating steps a moment later, along with the jingle of his belt and the soft creak of old leather. You lean over, fumble in the dark, and retrieve the offering. It's rough and dry, probably left over from the steward's table, but you tear off a piece and chew anyway. It's still slightly warm. Miraculous. The taste isn't much, but it's real solid and just enough to make you feel vaguely human again. You finish half, save the rest, and lie back, and for a brief moment, you're not a knight in a freezing castle on the edge of sleep and sanity. You're just someone grateful for warm bread and a well-timed act of kindness. The torchlight flickers under the door. Somewhere outside, another bell rings. You close your eyes. The meal is done, the cold has been held at bay for a little longer, and sleep comes easier when your belly isn't completely empty. Somewhere between sleep and full consciousness, your mind drifts into a strange little place, part memory, part hallucination, and part honest-to-goodness medieval anxiety. You're dreaming, but it doesn't feel like a dream. You're in the Great Hall, standing barefoot on the rush-covered floor, wearing nothing but your underclothes and a helmet, because of course. The fire is roaring, the torches are lit, and every noble in the county is watching as you attempt badly to joust a roast pig. You swing your sword, the pig squeals and sprouts wings, Sir Geoffrey is laughing from the rafters, and the bishop is applauding politely with a chalice of mead. Then a bell rings, loud, distant, and just like that the pig vanishes and your eyes snap open. You blink at the ceiling, heart thudding in that post-dream confusion where your brain hasn't yet sorted out reality from surrealist nightmare. The room is dim now, still pre-dawn, but brighter than before. There's a thin strip of grey light leaking in around the edge of the shutters. You can see your breath. Again. Of course, and the pillow has a new lump. Possibly a feather, possibly something else. You don't want to know more. That dream wasn't entirely random, though. You've had worse, much worse. Nightmares are something of a tradition in this line of work, and in this era, sleep is never just sleep. It's a whole second shift of your brain trying to file away everything you've seen, heard, or done, without the benefit of modern psychology, warm baths, or therapists. And some of those memories are sharp-edged. You've seen war. You've seen blood freeze on armour. You've seen men scream for mothers they barely remember. Try forgetting that when you lie down. In the medieval world, dreams are serious business. People don't dismiss them as mental noise or the side effects of indigestion. They are messages, sometimes from God, sometimes from the devil, sometimes from saints or spirits with far too much time on their hands. Monks write whole books on dream interpretation. There are scrolls listing symbols and their meanings. If you dream of a wolf, it might mean betrayal. If you dream of fire, it could mean sin or divine inspiration, or that you slept too close to the hearth and nearly lit your hair again. You, personally, tend to get the weird, food-related dreams. Stews with too many eyes, horses made of cheese. You chalk that up to hunger and trauma mixing like bad herbs, but others in the castle have sworn they've had prophetic dreams, visions of battles, deaths, and even comets. One of the older guards, Halfric, insists he dreamed of a black star the night before a nobleman fell from the North Tower. He tells that story every feast day, usually after his second cup of spiced wine, and let's not forget the dreams that feel real. Those are the worst, the ones where you're back on the battlefield, armour slick with their rain and blood, your sword so heavy your arms tremble. You see the face of someone you killed, but their mouth is moving, whispering something you can't quite hear. You wake up in a sweat, heart pounding, and for a moment you're not in a bed. You're in ditch. Alone. Again. The line between reality and nightmare is thin when you sleep in a place like this. The cold doesn't help. It presses in even while you dream, shaping your thoughts into something restless. You never sleep deeply, not really. The walls creak, the brazier flickers. The guard outside coughs again, closer now, and every little sound worms its way into your subconscious, twisting your dreams until even the kind ones feel suspicious. And here's where it gets strange. Some folks say that sleeping cold invites darker visions, that when the body's in discomfort, the mind opens up, vulnerable to otherworldly visitors. There are tales, whispered in the kitchen mostly, of people waking with frost on their lips and stories they can't explain, of seeing shadows at the foot of the bed, of hearing voices whispering in Old Church Latin, a language they never learned. You've never experienced anything that dramatic, but you've woken before with tears on your face and no idea why. That's enough for you. One time, years ago, during your first winter as a knight, you remember waking from a nightmare so vivid it left you trembling. You were running barefoot through the snow, chased by wolves that spoke in your mother's voice. When you finally sat up, soaked in sweat, your room had gone utterly still, and the fire had gone out. You hadn't noticed it dying, hadn't heard it hiss or crackle, just silence. Utter, bone-deep silence. It was the first time you realised that a castle doesn't just creak and groan. Sometimes it listens. There's an old superstition, still whispered among servants and even a few squires, that your dreams can leave imprints in the stones, that the walls remember, that a chamber with too much death in it becomes haunted, not by ghosts exactly, but by nightmares that aren't yours. That's why some lords never sleep in the same room twice, why some older knights carry amulets or relics with them into bed, not for protection from swords, but from dreams. You roll onto your side and tug the blanket higher. You don't believe in all that, not really, but you do find yourself murmuring a soft prayer under your breath, just in case. A little line your grandmother used to say, sir, guard my heart while I dream, guard my soul if I wake. It's not in any official holy book, but it feels real, feels right. And just like that, your breathing evens out again. The cold is still there, but distant now. The light outside the shutters is a little brighter. Morning is coming. You can smell it. Wood smoke, warm bread, horse sweat. The castle stirs gently like a bear in its den. You won't get much more sleep, and that's fine. You're used to living on fragments, an hour here, a nap there. A full night's sleep is for monks and merchants. You take what you can, when you can. But before you rise, you close your eyes one last time, hoping this time your dreams are quiet. No pigs, no armour, no shadows, just silence. You're not awake, not really, but you're not asleep either. It's that grey space in between, where your body has settled into warmth, but your brain is already scanning for danger. Something feels off. Not urgent, not threatening, just different. And then it... Not with panic, but with slow, creeping realization. You've woken in the middle of the night, on purpose. And somehow that's the most medieval thing about your sleep routine, because this isn't some random accidental waking. No, this is first sleep's end and the curious gap that follows. You weren't taught it, no one gave you instructions, but here you are, eyes open, fully alert, and not sure what to do with yourself at, 2, 3, no clocks in sight, just your own internal sundial saying, "Congratulations, you've survived the first part. Now what?" Welcome to segmented sleep, or as some scholars like to call it, the two-shift slumber. This was common knowledge in your world, though no one thinks of it as strange. People in this time don't expect to sleep in a single, unbroken stretch. They drift off not long after dusk. Once the hearth's gone low, the candles have guttered out, and the day's labour has wrung every drop of energy from their bones. That's first sleep, and it ends now. Second sleep doesn't start until an hour or two later. So here you are, lying awake, not troubled or confused, but aware, present. You feel your fingers again, the warmth of the cloak around your shoulders, the low pop of a coal in the brazier that somehow survived longer than expected. There's a strange kind of calm in this space. You sit up slowly, rest your elbows on your knees, and listen. The castle is quieter now, the night watch between shifts. Even the guards have grown softer in their movements, the armour not so loud. The footsteps more tired than dutiful. This is the hour of thoughts. In wealthier households, this is when the lady of the castle might rise to tend her loom or say prayers. Scholars might read, nobles might write letters, couples might speak softly or tend to more. Physical forms of connection. You've heard stories, whispers passed between squires, that this is the hour when many children are conceived. You wouldn't know. You're alone in your bed, save for a few rumpled furs and a mouse somewhere in the wall chewing on what you hope isn't your spare sock. You strike a flintant and coax a candle to life, shielding it from the breeze with your hand. The flicker throws a soft golden light across the walls. It dances on the cracked basin, on the edge of your boots, and on the ceiling beams above, the same beams that have watched generations of men and women wake up in this same hush and not quite know what to do with themselves. Some part of you enjoys this time. There's something intimate about it, something quietly powerful. The world has paused and you are not expected to do anything. No orders, no sword drills, no feast etiquette. Just exist. You shift your legs out from under the blanket, feeling the sting of cold air lick at your ankles. A mistake, but a minor one. You pull them back in, relishing the warmth your body has generated so far. It's not much, but it's yours. You remember your old master-at-arms, Sir Reynold, talking about the between hours. Said it was when his best ideas came. Said it was when the veil between worlds was thinnest, and thoughts from the divine, or from darker places, could slip in unnoticed. He used to scribble notes by candlelight, strange little thoughts about siege tactics, armour improvements, or how ducks were secretly more dangerous than they appeared. You wonder whatever happened to those notes. Probably used to wrap fish by now. There's debate among modern scholars, well, future scholars, not that you know that, about why this segmented sleep happened. Was it biological, a natural rhythm responding to the absence of artificial light? Or was it cultural, a habit formed by generations who simply had more hours of darkness than anything else? The answer is probably both. You don't question it. You've always known people wake up at night. The surprise is when they don't. Sometimes during these hours the castle feels stranger than it does by day. Larger, more echoing. You can hear the wind turning the weather vane 3 towers away. You can hear the wooden beam above your door creak with what sounds almost like a voice. You know it's not. Probably Still, you light a second candle, just in case. You've used this time for many things over the years: mending a belt, relacing your boots, practicing your grip on the hilt of your sword when you couldn't fall back asleep. Once long ago, you used it to cry quietly into the crook of your arm after a letter arrived too late to say goodbye. No one saw. That was the magic of these hours. They were yours, private, unguarded. No one expects anything from you between first and second sleep. Tonight you simply sit. You listen to the fire sigh, to your heartbeat slow. You stretch your neck until it pops. You run a hand over your beard, or the stubborn stubble that passes for one. You make a mental list of things you need to do tomorrow. Check your saddle straps, ask the steward for new bootlaces, apologise to Sir William for calling his hunting hound a goat. Long story, probably best left forgotten. Your eyes begin to droop again, not from exhaustion, but from that gentle pull back toward the blanket. You feel the return of second sleep creeping in like a tide, not fast, not overwhelming, but steady. The candle is burned just enough to pull wax near the base. You lean over and pinch the flame out with damp fingers. Darkness rushes back in, but it's softer now. Not the suffocating kind from before, but a familiar shade. You curl beneath the furs, wrap the cloak tighter, and let second sleep take you. The best kind of rest comes after a quiet moment like this. You wake again with the unsettling realization that someone is breathing near your face. Not heavily, not threateningly, just a steady, warm little rhythm, soft, animal, and absolutely not your own. You freeze. Your mind scrambles through a checklist. Did you lock the door? Yes. Did you dream someone came in? No. Is this the beginning of a haunting? Also probably no. Slowly, cautiously, you lift your head and squint through the dim morning haze that started to filter into the room like thin soup. And there it is, nestled up against your shoulder, curled into a tight little coil of fur and indifference. The castle cat. Again. This animal, this scruffy orange streak of entitlement, has apparently decided you are now a part of its nightly routine. You don't know where it comes from, no one does. It appears when it pleases and leaves when it's bored. You once tried to shoo it away and found it staring you down with such raw disdain that you actually apologised. Since then, you have reached an understanding. You are the mattress, and it is royalty. You shift slightly, trying not to disturb it, because despite your better judgment, the thing is warm. Gloriously, unreasonably warm. The cat is a portable furnace with attitude issues and questionable hygiene, and it has made your bed, otherwise a cold, scratchy disaster, something tolerable. And you're not the only one who knows this. In the medieval world, sharing a bed wasn't just common, it was essential, especially in winter. And not always in the way you might imagine. You didn't just share a bed with spouses or lovers, friends, squires, servants, even strangers on the road. It was often a matter of practicality, not intimacy. Body heat was the most reliable heating system available, and if that meant curling up beside someone who hadn't bathed in 3 weeks and snored like a dying goat, so be it. You've shared a bed with more men than you'd care to count, not out of preference but out of weather-based necessity. Sometimes you got lucky and ended up with someone quiet and still. Other times you got kicked in the ribs every 20 minutes by a knight who dreamed with his whole body. Once, on campaign, you shared a blanket with a nobleman who whispered theological debates in his sleep. You still wake up muttering about transubstantiation. The weird part? No one thinks it's strange. There's no shame in it. It's just how things are. Bedding down together is as natural as eating together or praying together. You sleep in shifts during war, you sleep in rows during travel, and in winter, you sleep close enough that you can recite each other's dreams by the time spring comes around. Even in the castle, among the slightly more privileged, bedfellows are common. If your chamber is big enough, a servant might sleep in the corner or at the foot of your bed. Not out of subservience, but to keep warm and to be ready should you need anything in the night. You've heard tales, half confirmed, of full-grown men curling up beside their lieges in bed like loyal dogs. You've even done it yourself once or twice when injured or ill. Your lord didn't blink, just said, "Don't steal the blankets," and turned over. The clergy wrote endless sermons about this practice naturally. Some praised the companionship and brotherhood it created. Others warned about temptation and impropriety, but the average knight or servant or peasant wasn't reading treatises, they were just trying not to freeze. Morality was easier to consider when your toes weren't black with frostbite. One fringe historical curiosity. In some parts of Europe, specific positions in bed were seen as symbolic. The outer edge, closest to the door, was the protector's spot. The middle was for the person of highest rank, and anyone near the foot, likely a servant or a squire, curled up on the edge like a glorified footstool. You've slept in all three positions, sometimes in the same night. You remember one particularly brutal winter years ago. The snow came early and the fires were low. You shared a bed with your squire, a healer, and 2 other knights, layered like laundry in a trunk. You all lay there, cocooned in cloaks and sharrowed misery, too tired to speak, too cold to sleep. But you survived, and the next day you fought like lions. There's something about that closeness, the awful, awkward, undeniable human nearness that sharpens loyalty. After all, once someone's heard you snore, burped in your direction and shared your lice, they're not just a fellow soldier, they're basically family. Not everyone was so lucky. Servants often slept in hallways or kitchens, curled up beside hearths if they were lucky, or bundled in hay if they weren't. Some even slept upright, leaning against barrels or slumped in corners. You've stumbled across more than one scullion passed out beside a bread oven, drooling and sighing in their sleep like they'd found paradise. And honestly, in winter, maybe they had. You stretch again now, careful not to dislodge the cat, and let your eyes drift to the arrow slit. Outside, dawn is bleeding in slowly, dull and pale. You can hear faint movement beyond your door, guards trading shifts, the clatter of buckets, the sleepy shuffle of someone who definitely didn't get enough rest. You don't want to get up. The bed is still warm, shockingly so. Between the cat and your own cocoon of layered garments, you've achieved a rare state of medieval comfort. But you know you'll have to rise soon. Duties call, squires wait, armour needs checking. You're expected to be at morning prayer or on patrol or dealing with yet another noble's horse that refuses to behave. That's the life you chose, or the life that chose you. Still, for just a few minutes more you allow yourself this stolen moment. This quiet stretch of warmth and stillness and shared breath. You scratch behind the cat's ears. It purrs barely. You think briefly about how strange it is that in all the chaos and brutality of this life, this world of steel and frost and shouting, one of the most dependable sources of comfort is a half-feral animal who sleeps on your face. And honestly, you're not even mad about it. There's a certain kind of ache that only comes from waking up next to your armour. Not in it, mind you, you're not completely insane, but so close to it that it might as well be sharing your bed. Your leg brushes against the edge of your greaves, and your elbow knocks the rounded dome of your helmet, which tumbles to the floor with a dull thunk that echoes like a disapproving monk. You stare at it from under your blanket, unamused, and then look down at the rest of the pile. Your breastplate, cuisses, vambraces, gauntlets, gorget, all laid out like a metal corpse beside you. That's the thing about being a knight. You don't sleep in your armour, but you sure as the saints sleep near it, especially in winter, especially during uncertain times. And really, when are times ever certain in a medieval castle? War could break out by Brecland, raiders could come in the night, a rival lord could send a messenger carrying bad news and worse intentions. You need to be ready, always. Now let's be very clear about something. Wearing armour to bed is not a thing. Not for any sane person anyway. It's absurd, heavy, cold, and wildly uncomfortable. You've heard that rumour, the one passed around in taverns by drunk storytellers. Ah yes, real knights. They slept in full plate, ready for battle at any moment. Absolute nonsense. Try wearing chainmail for an hour, let alone a whole night. You'll be sweating, itchy, and praying for death by the second hour. You'd sleep less like a warrior and more like a rotisserie chicken. That said, keeping your armour close by, that's just common sense. You keep it cleaned, oiled, and stacked in the exact order you'd put it on. Sword belt draped over the chair, dagger under the pillow. Yes, you actually sleep with a dagger under your pillow, like some paranoid fairy tale character. Because you've seen enough night raids to know the door's just a suggestion when someone's determined. Some nights go even further. You knew one man who slept with his shield leaned against the bed and his helmet already strapped under one arm like a particularly aggressive teddy bear. He claimed it gave him peace of mind. He also once punched a servant for startling him awake, so make of that what you will. The armour itself, it's not glamorous. Yours is practical, well forged, well maintained, dented in places but trustworthy. The breastplate still shows the faint scratch from a skirmish last year, and one of the greaves has a stubborn stain you keep meaning to polish out. It smells faintly of metal, leather, and the kind of sweat that never quite washes out. You've grown used to it, fond of it even. In a way, the scent of armour is more comforting than incense. It means protection, strength, preparedness. You once shared a room with a knight who didn't believe in sleeping near his gear, kept it in a chest down the hall, said it was bad luck to look at it too often. The night a brawl broke out in the yard, he had to run barefoot across flagstones in his nightshirt, swinging a stool like a sword. That same night you rolled out of bed, had your mail hauberk on in under 2 minutes, and disarmed a drunk blacksmith before he could brain the steward. Guess who got the commendation? Scholars still debate how much of this sleeping next to your armour habit was widespread. Some argue that in peacetime knights stored their gear away, neatly tucked into trunks. Others believe the looming threat of skirmishes, raids, or internal castle disputes made most warriors keep their arms within grabbing distance. You've never had the luxury of relaxing that much. Comfort breeds complacency, and complacency gets you killed. There's also the matter of routine. Every night before you sleep, you go through the same process. Check each piece, oil the leather, wipe down the steel, arrange it like a puzzle beside your bed. It's as much a ritual as your evening prayer. Some men drink, some recite psalms. You polish gauntlets and hum an old battle hymn under your breath. It keeps your hands busy and your thoughts from wandering too far into the abyss. And yet there's an irony in it. The armour that protects you also prevents you from resting fully. It dominates the room, looming in the half-light, catching the glow of the fire and reflecting it like cold lightning. It's hard to feel relaxed when a steel breastplate is staring at you from 3 feet away. Sometimes when you're half asleep it looks like a person. You've spooked yourself more than once in the dark, swearing that someone was standing in the corner when it was just your own shadow reflected off the helm. There's even a bit of superstition attached. Some say if you wake and see your armour glowing in moonlight it means battle is near. Others believe that dreaming of your armour walking without you is a bad omen, death or betrayal depending on the region. You try not to put too much stock in that, but still, you've caught yourself waking in the middle of the night and reaching out to touch your sword, just to be sure it's still there. And when the room is utterly still, when the brazier has cooled and the wind outside has gone silent, you sometimes wonder, is this how kings sleep? With armour laid out beside them like old friends? Or do they rest easier, cushioned by velvet and guarded by men like you, never needing to keep a dagger within reach? You doubt it. Even kings have enemies, perhaps especially kings. Eventually, you shift back under the covers, careful not to nudge anything out of place. The metal catches the faintest glow of dawn as it creeps across the floor, and for a moment everything looks calm. You lie there, eyes half closed, and think about all the battles that never came, the ambushes that didn't happen, the assassins who never arrived, and you think maybe, just maybe, it's because your armour was watching. By the time your eyes flick open again, the candle stub on the stool beside you has melted into a tiny puddle of wax, long extinguished. The brazier is cold, the embers nothing but faint whispers of red, and the light filtering into the chamber has taken on that grey-blue tone that only appears in the early moments before dawn actually bothers to commit. You pull the blanket up over your mouth and exhale into it, trying to recapture a little warmth. It smells like wool, smoke, and you, a scent profile that probably wouldn't sell well but might be considered authentically night. And then you hear it, the soft flick of flint, the hesitant spark and this crackle of a candle being relit outside your door. Not your candle, someone else's. The guards are making their final rounds before sunrise. You can hear the shift in their voices, the difference between the graveyard muttering of midnight patrols and the tired, slightly relieved tones of men who know breakfast is imminent and nobody got stabbed during their watch. This, you know, is the hour of candles, not torches, not hearth fires, just candles, small, flickering, unreliable, and utterly necessary. You sit up slowly, letting the blanket slide from your shoulders, and grope for your own flint and wick. The candle you kept by your bedside is half spent, melted crooked from leaning too close to the brazier during the night. You coax it back to life, shielding it from the ever-present draught with your hand. The flame sputters once, twice, then catches. A tiny globe of light flickering wildly, but enough to cast shadows on the wall and turn the stone around you from black to something resembling warm grey. You'd think, in a castle made of thick stone and looming timbers, fire would be your best friend. But the truth? It's a frenemy at best. You need it. You rely on it. And it will absolutely ruin you if you let your guard down. Fire doesn't ask questions, it just eats. Candles are the worst offenders. Tiny, deceptively innocent things that tip over at the worst possible moments. You've seen it happen too many times. A servant nods off beside one, and suddenly there's a tapestry on fire. A monk sets down his scripture too close, and boom! Half the margin notes are toast. Once, in the dead of winter, a young squire tried to read by candlelight in bed. He fell asleep, the candle tipped into his blanket, and the mattress went up like kindling. The only reason the castle didn't burn to the foundations was that his roommate woke up to the smell of scorched hair and slapped him with a frozen boot. So no, candles are not the innocent little flame kisses they pretend to be. They are slow-motion disasters with a romantic aesthetic, yet here you are, lighting one anyway, because without it the room is unlivable. Your breath fogs in the cold, the walls press in, the darkness feels heavier somehow, more intentional. You need the candle, not just for light, but for the illusion that you're in control, that this little flame is enough to keep the shadows at bay, both the literal and the ones that only live in your head. You place it on the narrow shelf beside your basin and watch the flame dance. It casts long, shaky shadows across the walls, turning the corners of the room into living things. The armour beside your bed catches a glint and throws it back in a warped, distorted reflection. Your own face flickers in the polished steel of your helm, for just a second. Blurred, tired, older than you remember. You look away. It wasn't always like this. Once, long ago, castles burned bright. Great halls full of torches, feasting tables lit with oil lamps, fireplaces roaring with enough heat to make you forget the stone walls. But that was a festival, a holiday, a wedding. You remember one winter solstice where the entire castle stayed awake until dawn, singing around a bonfire in the courtyard. That fire burned so hot it cracked the stones beneath it. The next morning, the steward found a pair of boots melted to the flagstones with no owner in sight. Those nights were rare. The rest of the year, fire was rationed like wine in a monastery. You didn't just light candles for the fun of it. Wax was expensive. Tallow was cheap but stank like a butcher's apron. Oil was for the rich, or for keeping siege weapons lit, not your nightstand. Every candle in the castle is counted, tracked, and handed out like you're a child asking for sweets. The steward's apprentice literally has a book with a wax tally in it. One time you took a second candle without asking, and the man looked at you like you'd slapped his grandmother. So yes, your candle is precious, dangerous, yes, but precious. And as it burns, you use the time wisely. You inspect your boots, you test the straps on your sword belt. You write a few crooked lines in the tiny parchment ledger you keep tucked under your bed. Not a diary, not exactly, but close. You don't write poetry, you're not that sentimental. But you jot down details. What you dreamed, how cold it got, whether the cat visited, what the fire sounded like as it died. It's not for anyone else. It's for you. A kind of anchor. Something to remind you that you exist outside the sword drills and endless frost. And then you blow the candle out. Not all at once. First you watch it, the way the flame shivers and narrows to a tight little spear. You hold your breath. You whisper your usual phrase, "Stay put, I'll be back," which is absurd but comforting. Then you pinch it out between thumb and forefinger. The smoke curls upward, soft and grey, like a sigh. The room darkens again, but this time you're ready for it. Because candles don't just give you light, they give you permission to pause, to think, to make the night your own, even if only for a few minutes. Outside, the faintest hint of dawn is finally breaking, and inside you lie back in the dark, feeling a little less lost. The first sound you hear isn't the bells, it isn't the guards changing shifts or the clatter of breakfast pots in the kitchen. It's music, or at least the medieval approximation of it. A lute, plucked slowly and badly. Someone, somewhere in the castle, is playing a tune they half remember from childhood. With the enthusiasm of a dreamer and the skill of a man with mittens for fingers, the melody stumbles, repeats, then gives up entirely in favour of humming. You can't help but smile in the dark. And just like that, your brain reminds you of where you are in the castle's pecking order. Your room is positioned right above the Great Hall, which, in the early hours, isn't silent, not even close. Beneath you, the day has already begun in all its awkward, noisy glory. You hear voices now, not raised in alarm, but in argument. Someone's upset about a missing platter. Someone else is laughing about it. There's a crash, a curse, then the scraping of chairs being dragged across stone. You can picture it perfectly. The Great Hall is where life happens, feasts, councils, arguments, duels, verbal and otherwise. and, on unfortunate occasions, bad poetry contests. During the day, it's the heart of the castle. At night, it becomes a hybrid space, part dormitory, part dining room, part low-level tavern. And depending on the mood of the household, it can be a place of holy silence or full-blown chaos until sunrise. You know all this because you've slept down there before, many times. Especially during campaigns, or when noble guests overflow the private chambers and everyone has to shuffle down the social ladder for a few nights. The squires sleep closest to the walls, knights arrange their cloaks beside the hearth. A few always end up under the table, whether by accident or ale. The problem with sleeping above the Great Hall, like you are now, isn't the noise necessarily. It's which noise. It's one thing to hear soft lute music or a fire crackling in a distant hearth, but more often than not it's burping, or singing, or the unique sound of someone falling off a bench in the middle of a sentence. And tonight, or rather this very early morning, is no exception. Someone starts clapping below, once, slowly, then again. There's a murmur of voices rising in half-hearted applause. You can guess what's happening without even moving. Some overconfident fool is trying to impress a kitchen maid with a drinking song and exactly 0 sense of pitch. You wait for it, and there it is, the slurred warble of an off-key baritone drifting up through the stone. The worst part? You know the lyrics. "O come fair maiden, pour me wine, I'll swear to love thee till the swine." You groan, burying your face in the furs. This song has been haunting castle halls for centuries. No one knows who wrote it. Some say it was a bard who got rejected by a noblewoman and took it out on rhyme and meter. Others say it's ancient, older than most of the stone in the walls. Either way, it's back, again. Sung by someone who thinks they're charming and will regret it deeply when the steward makes them clean the stables for 2 days as penance. That's the thing about castles. They're never quiet, not really. Especially when the Great Hall is involved. Even when the fires are low and most people have gone to bed, there's always someone lingering. A drunk knight who doesn't want to return to his freezing room, a servant sneaking extra bread, a visiting minstrel who has overstayed their welcome and is now sleeping upright with their head on a dulcimer. And in the thick of winter, when people huddle close to the hearths and drink more than they should, the hall becomes its own kind of ecosystem. People who barely speak by day become philosophers by firelight. Enemies argue and sometimes cry it out. There are always dice rolling in a corner, and the clink of someone losing money they swore they'd never bet. Once, you saw a man gamble away a pair of boots while wearing them. There's also a peculiar tradition that occurs in some households, particularly after feasts: fire tales. Not just stories, but confessions, sometimes even dreams, spoken aloud in the flicker of the hearth when the air is heavy with smoke and secrets. You've heard grown men admit to fears they'd never voice by daylight. One winter, after too much wine, a knight twice your age told the Great Hall that he still dreamed of his mother's voice calling him in the woods. No one laughed. No one dared. Because the fire demands honesty, and everyone understands the cost of mocking that. Above it all, there's a quiet tension, especially in times of political unrest. Because while the hall is filled with food and song, it's also where plots are whispered, where someone might accidentally leave a note on the wrong table, where a smile during the feast can mean alliance or betrayal. So yes, the hall is loud, messy, and often smells like old gravy, but it's also where power simmers just beneath the surface. Now, as you lie there trying to get the last half hour of sleep before the bells demand your presence in the chapel, you hear the unmistakable sound of someone knocking over a mug and stepping in it. Then comes the laughter, real, human and tired. It rises through the floor like warmth. You don't recognize the voice, but it makes you smile anyway. There's a comfort in knowing that while you were sleeping, while you were wrestling with cold and cats and dreams of armour, life went on just a floor below. People laughed, drank, sang badly. Maybe someone kissed someone they shouldn't have. Maybe a squire learned a new dice trick. Maybe the old cook told that story about the haunted sausage again. Whatever happened, it belongs to the night now, and the hall will sweep it all away with sawdust and fresh rushes before morning. You stretch, groan, and prepare to rise. The song has mercifully ended. The lute is quiet. Someone below is snoring with dedication. The fire has probably burned down to ash, but the memory of it lingers in the stone. It's a new day almost, but for just a few more minutes the castle is still holding on to the night. You finally swing your legs over the side of the bed and plant your feet on the cold stone floor, only to be greeted by a sensation that can only be described as medieval betrayal. Your toes immediately begin writing their wills. The flagstones are colder than the outer walls, colder than the moat, possibly colder than the void between stars. You recoil, instinctively pulling your feet back up into your cloak cocoon, but it's no use, you're up now, and once your body knows it, it's not going back. The room around you has that unmistakable stale bite of castle winter, somewhere between frozen grain sack and crypt. You light a small taper, shielding the tiny flame from the persistent breeze slithering under your door. You shouldn't be able to feel wind inside a bedroom, but here we are. You hold the taper up, scanning your surroundings in that half-resentful way one surveys a crime scene. Everything is where you left it. Your armour sits obediently in the corner. Your boots lie near the bed, turned over to keep scorpions, or worse, snow, from falling in. Your satchel of supplies leans against the wall like a bored mule. But there, just past the threshold, along the base of the wall, you spot something new, a dark smudge of movement. You squint. It squints back. It's a rat. A bold one. Not the cowering, skittering kind you'd expect to flee from footsteps or flickering light. No, this one simply blinks, gives a sort of shrug with its whiskers, and proceeds to drag what appears to be a piece of dried fruit under the table with all the casual confidence of a minor noble. You stare at it. It stares back. A truce is formed. You will allow this small crime to continue, and it will not run across your feet while you're getting dressed. Because rats are part of castle life. They live in the walls, behind the tapestries, under the floorboards, in the cellars, the granaries, the kitchens. They live better than some of the servants. They feast on spilled grain, stolen meat, unattended bread. You once saw a rat dragging a whole apple across the chapel floor. That rat had ambition. You throw on your outer tunic, wrapping it over your underclothes with the practiced, grumpy efficiency of a man who has dressed in the dark more times than he can count. You don't even wince anymore at the feel of rough wool against your skin. It's a second hide now. But as you lace your boots and try not to inhale the deep, musty aroma of days-old leather, you're reminded of something very real. This castle is not clean. Not by any modern standard. Not by any standard that doesn't involve a stable and a shovel. You know the list by heart. Rats, fleas, bedbugs, lice. The 4 horsemen of the castle. They are your constant companions. You might be a knight, a warrior trained in the art of killing and chivalry, but you are also, at any given moment, a living buffet for tiny parasites with no sense of decency. You've woken up with bites before, sharp, red, irritating little dots on your arms, your legs, your neck. At first, you blame spiders, then your squire. Eventually, you learn the truth. Your bed is a battlefield, and you are not always the victor. There's even a local superstition that says if a flea bites your sword hand, it means a duel is coming. If it bites your rear, you'll be made a fool in public. And if it bites your face, well, you just weren't praying hard enough. One winter, the castle faced an infestation so bad, the steward declared war on the vermin. Buckets of cold water were poured across the stone floors. Every rush and straw mat was removed and burned. The kitchen was shut for 3 days. The lord slept in the chapel. The rest of you were handed vinegar-soaked rags and told to scrub the walls while sneezing from the fumes. The rats didn't even blink. You caught one sitting in the ashes of the hearth like a fat little demon, roasting a crust of bread it had somehow stolen from the bishop's private pantry. And if the animals aren't bad enough, there's the castle itself. Old wood groans under your feet. Floorboards creak like they're mourning the weight of generations. Doors swell and stick with the damp. Every hinge sounds like it's suffering from arthritis. The very stones shift in the frost, expanding and contracting, pushing moisture out of the walls in slow drips that sometimes freeze inside the room. You've brushed frost off your blanket before. That's not a metaphor. That happened. One night last winter, you awoke to a horrible echoing crack, the kind of sound that makes you think the castle is about to collapse, or that a giant has decided to use the battlements as a footrest. Turns out, it was just a water barrel that had frozen solid and split open in the pantry below. Still, the panic lingered for hours. There's an open debate among the men about what's worse, rats or the drafts. The rats at least provide entertainment. You've watched 2 of them fight over a hunk of cheese for 15 minutes like it was a prize duel. The drafts, on the other hand, are sneaky, malicious. You'll seal your door, hang extra cloth over the window, plug the arrow slits with old rags, and still a wind will find its way in, brushing your neck like a cold finger. You've nearly accused your own squire of sorcery. And then, of course, there's the ever-looming plague. Not always present, but never truly gone. Every cough in winter earns a side-eye. Every boil gets examined by candlelight and whispered about behind hands. Rats, after all, though, are not just pests, they are omens. You try not to think about it, but once you've seen a town quarantined, the image never really leaves you. You finish dressing, run a hand through your hair, and take one last look around. The rat is gone now, prize in tow. The room is as clean as a castle room ever gets. The brazier is cold, the window slit is leaking light, and the floor under your boots still holds the memory of midnight frost. You breathe deep, steady yourself, and step out into the corridor. It's a new day, and despite the creaks, the critters, and the coughs, you're still standing. The corridor outside your chamber is colder than your room, which seems physically impossible until you're standing in it, immediately rethinking your life choices. The stone underfoot is slick with moisture, either frost from the drafty towers or some melted mystery substance you choose not to investigate. You draw your cloak tighter, duck your head beneath a low timber beam, and trudge toward the east wing where the squires sleep. Or more accurately, where they don't sleep, because being a squire in winter is the medieval equivalent of living in a barely disguised punishment chamber. You know this because once, not that long ago, that was you. And let's be honest, back then your bed wasn't even a bed. It was a blanket. On the floor. Near a hearth if you were lucky, near a drafty staircase if you weren't. You remember nights curled beside a set of boots that weren't yours, praying the owner wouldn't come looking for them maybe until dawn. You learned early that servants slept wherever there was room, and squires were barely a step above that. Technically, your sleeping spot was under your knight's bed, literally under it. You'd roll yourself up in your cloak like a sad pastry, tucking in your arms and feet to conserve heat, and pray the man didn't snore so hard that the dust shook down from the rafters. He did, of course. All the knights snored. It's a rule. The louder the snores, the more important the man. That was the joke passed among squires while hauling buckets or scrubbing flagstones until your fingers bled. But it wasn't just the lack of a bed that made it hard, it was the interruptions. At any hour you could be called on to fetch something, run a message, tend to a horse, find someone's misplaced dagger, or wake your knight for an early patrol. You slept in fear of the door opening, and it always did. The east wing smells exactly as you remember. Hay, wet wool, unwashed adolescent boy, and just the faintest hint of boiled turnips from someone's contraband snack. The heavy wooden door to the squire's chamber creaks as you push it open. Inside, the room is packed with bodies, cloaks, and snoring. Every available surface is claimed. There are 6 actual beds, all shoved against the walls, each with 2 squires crammed together under shared furs. On the floor, it's a mosaic of cloaks and limbs. A boot here, a hand there, someone's head resting on what looks like a rolled-up saddlebag. One squire is using his own chainmail shirt as a pillow, which might be the bravest or dumbest decision you've ever witnessed. You step over legs, careful not to rouse anyone. The room is dimly lit by the pale blue light coming through a single arrow slit. The air is thick, stuffy, humid with breath and the remnants of yesterday's wet boots. But somehow still cold. How is that even possible? The warmth of so many bodies should have created at least some comfort. But no, it's cold and southering. A magic trick only castle sleeping quarters seem to pull off. In the far corner, one of the younger squires stirs and sees you. He blinks, clearly trying to decide if this is a dream. You raise a finger to your lips and gesture for him to go back to sleep. He nods, curls up tighter, and disappears beneath a patchwork blanket that's more whole than fabric. That boy's name is Will, he's 12, barely taller than a longbow, and he once polished your boots so well you slipped down a flight of stairs. You didn't hold it against him, much. You remember being that small, that uncertain. You remember the bone-deep cold of your first winter in service. You had no cloak then, just an oversized tunic and a pair of socks that had more patches than original thread. You remember lying awake at night, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loud, surrounded by boys just like you, all of them pretending not to be terrified, of failure, of punishment, of never becoming anything more than a shadow in the corner of someone else's story. One time a squire sneezed in the night and got a boot thrown at his head. Another time someone sleepwalked straight into the fireplace and had to be dragged out before they set themselves alight. You think his name was Edwin, or Edgar. He left the castle after that. Rumour said he joined a monastery, but others claimed he wandered into the forest and married a bear. You choose to believe both. Some nights the squires would whisper stories to each other, half-true tales of great knights, lost loves, ghosts in the West Tower. Anything to keep the dark at bay. You joined in once, telling a tale of a haunted shield that screamed whenever its bearer lied. It got you a few chuckles, and for one evening, you felt like more than just another half-asleep child in a pile of limbs. You scan the room again and spot your current squire, Thomas, near the hearth, curled up with a dog. Of course, that dog doesn't belong to anyone in particular. It just shows up. Castle dogs are like that, appearing wherever the heat or scraps are best. This one is small, ugly, and devoted entirely to Thomas. Probably because Thomas sneaks it cheese. You'll say nothing. Thomas is snoring, mouth open, hair in his eyes. His cloak is halfway off his body, exposing one arm and part of his back. No wonder the idiot's always coughing. You move quietly, gently pulling the cloak back over him. He doesn't wake, but he sighs in that heavy, grateful way only the sleeping can manage. You stand there for a moment, watching him breathe. It's a strange thing, this role reversal. You were once him. Now you're the one checking to see if he's warm enough. The moment passes. You turn and leave the chamber, easing the door shut behind you. The corridor is still cold, still grey. But as you walk back toward the main hall, your hands tucked into your sleeves, you realise that the cold doesn't bite quite so hard when you've seen someone else sleeping through it. And maybe that's what gets you through it all. Not blankets, not gear, not even furs. But the strange, stubborn bond between those who freeze together. You make your way toward the chapel, steps slow and deliberate, shoulders hunched not in prayer, but against the cold that snuck its way inside your bones and set up permanent residence. The east corridor is dim, lit only by slivers of early morning light filtering through the narrow stained glass windows. The glow is pale and anemic, casting long-coloured shadows across the walls. Reds, blues, greens. Holy light, if you believe in that sort of thing. But today those flickering hues just make the stone look colder, like a mosaic made of frozen saints. You pass under a crumbling arch, boots echoing softly in the silence, and as you reach the side door to the chapel, your fingers brush something nailed to the wall. Smooth wood, carved and worn with age. You know what it is without looking, a crucifix or some version of it. It's old. Older than the castle, maybe, and carved in the style of some forgotten region where Christ looks more like a battle-weary knight than a holy saviour. There are no gold inlays, no silver trim, just cracked wood, a drooping crown of thorns, and a face that looks tired enough to understand the kind of sleep you just had. You press your fingers to it anyway, out of habit, out of pure, or maybe just superstition. The chapel smells of ash, beeswax, and damp cloth. It always does. You're not the first to arrive. A monk is already kneeling near the altar, cloaked in silence and too many layers of wool. One of the castle ladies slips in behind you, her breath puffing visibly into the cold. There's no fire in here, of course. The Lord's house doesn't require warmth, just devotion. You sit near the back, as knights tend to do, giving the illusion of piety without having to kneel too long on the hard stone floor. And as the prayers begin, soft and rhythmic, half-chanted by the monk, you let your eyes drift across the space, noting the bits of detail most never bother with. The cracks in the floor from frost and time, the thin frost clinging to the edges of the leaded windows, the little pile of melted candle stubs gathered near the front pew, the frayed edge of the tapestry depicting some saint or other defeating a demon that looks suspiciously like a pig. All of it adds up to one truth. This place might be sacred, but it's still cold. Holy doesn't mean insulated, and that, of course, is when your eyes land on the shelf of relics. They sit in their glass cases and wooden frames, nestled like little treasures behind iron bars. A sliver of bone, a frayed bit of cloth, a tiny vial of something that might be oil or just very determined dust. Supposedly sacred, supposedly powerful. The monk once claimed that one of the bones belonged to St. Hubert, patron of knights. Another, just a finger-sized chip of femur, was said to ward off illness. And the cloth? That was from the robe of St. Cuthbert, or maybe someone who once saw St. Cuthbert's robe from across a market square. You don't believe in all of it. Or rather, you believe just enough to keep your skepticism quiet. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. In the dead of winter, when your joints ache and your blankets are thin and the wind has taken on the voice of something ancient, anything that offers comfort starts to feel real. Even a splinter of some long-dead bishop's femur. Some nights you've caught fellow knights slipping into the chapel after dark, not to pray, not exactly, but to sit near the relics, eyes closed, hands pressed together, in that half-guilty posture of desperation. It's not about holiness, it's about hope. And when your chamber walls have grown ice on the inside, hope is a pretty decent blanket. There's even a quiet tradition among the squires, mostly whispered during chores or while polishing helmets too battered to salvage, that sleeping near a relic wards off nightmares. You're not sure where the idea came from. Maybe from the monks, maybe from some mother's bedtime tale, but it stuck. One boy snuck into the chapel and slept under the pew for a week during a particularly harsh frost, claiming that the saint's aura kept him warm. He still got chilblains, but swears he didn't dream once the whole time. You remember a time years ago when you were out on patrol, cold, wet, half lost in a frozen forest, and your horse stumbled into a ditch. You fell with it, landed hard and broke something in your shoulder. You lay there for what felt like hours, shivering, teeth rattling so hard you thought they'd crack. And in that miserable darkness, your mind did something strange. It reached not for training or for the gods of war, but for a tiny, useless memory. A priest once telling you to say a blessing over your body before sleep, as if it would seal in your warmth like wax on a letter. You said the words, barely able to move your lips, and eventually someone found you. The shoulder healed crooked, and your horse never walked the same again, but ever since, you've muttered that same little prayer under your breath before bed. Every night, even when you sleep in hay, even when you sleep under stars, even when you sleep in a bed so cold it could host a snowman's funeral. So maybe you don't believe in the relics exactly, but you believe in believing, and sometimes that's enough. The prayer ends. The monk stands, creaking like an old door. People begin to leave, their bootsteps echoing through the chapel's narrow aisles. You linger a little longer, watching the light shift through the glass and dapple the floor in fractured colour. Then on impulse you walk forward. You stop in front of the case with the cloth, supposedly from St. Cuthbert. It's no longer any colour you recognise, just a faded strip, curled and cracked with age, held down by wax and reverence. You reach out not to touch it. You wouldn't dare, but just to be near it, to see it up close. You don't ask for anything. You just stand there and breathe. Eventually you turn and head for the door. The air outside bites harder now, but something in your chest feels less fragile. And maybe, just maybe, tonight's sleep will come a little easier. By the time you return to your chamber, there's a new voice echoing through the upper halls, sharp, nasal, and unreasonably offended by its own existence. You recognise it instantly. You don't even need to hear the name. That voice belongs to one man and one man only, Sir Allard of Brayfield, distant cousin to Lord Everard and the man currently occupying your old room. You pause just beyond the arch, listening. His words are clear enough. He's shouting about the draught in the fireplace, the poor condition of the furs, and the shocking state of the straw mattress, which he swears smells like it belonged to a goat. You want to shout back. It probably did, but you don't. You just listen, amused, and continue walking. The poor servant trapped inside with him, judging by the soft apologies, is the same boy who once spilled porridge on a bishop and lived to tell the tale. You give him until sundown before he pretends to be deaf. Castle hospitality has its limits, and winter pushes those limits daily. When noble guests arrive, they are given the best beds, the warmest chambers, the thickest furs, the most politely disguised lies about how many fires can be kept going at once. And when they're cold, which they always are, they complain, loudly. Noble blood doesn't make your toes any warmer, but it does give you permission to make everyone else miserable about it. You've played this game before, so Allard isn't the first noble visitor to take one look at a centuries-old stone wall and declare it unfit for human occupation. They all come expecting something out of a poem. Soft beds, roaring hearths, and steaming baths. What they get is your room, your firewood ration, and your hard-earned knowledge that warmth is a fleeting, delicate privilege in a building designed more for siege survival than slumber. Still, the castle does its best. The steward keeps a store of clean furs for noble guests, mostly fox, some rabbit, and one suspiciously bald thing that might have started life as a weasel. Fresh rushes are scattered on the floors to hide the smell of damp stone and anxiety. Someone is always sent to relight the hearths, even if it's just with a handful of damp twigs and a whispered prayer to St. Florian, patron of things that catch fire, and hopefully don't explode. And of course you, the knight whose room has been graciously reassigned, are expected to act thrilled. After all, what's a little discomfort when a cousin of a baron's nephew needs your space to moan about the pillow density? You've smiled through worse. You once gave up your bed to a visiting abbot and slept in the stables for 3 nights, only to be thanked with a half-eaten fig and a sermon about humility. The strange thing is, despite the indignity, part of you is used to it. There's an old saying among the castle guard: a guest's comfort is a knight's burden. And whether the guest is a nobleman or some minor court hanger-on with a bad wig and louder shoes, you adjust. You fold your cloak, move your armour, take your pillow, because you're not that generous, and find another corner of the keep to survive the night in. Rank may grant you a sword and a title, but it does not apparently guarantee a bed. This tradition goes back centuries. Guest culture in castles wasn't just courtesy, it was laythings. You kept allies warm, you gave rivals the good mattress. You offered comfort not just out of kindness, but out of calculation. A well-rested noble is less likely to start a war, or at least they'll do it with fewer complaints. There's even a particularly charming medieval custom, where the hosting lord would give up his own bed to the most honoured guest. It's meant to be symbolic. I trust you with my home, my hearth, my very place of rest. You personally think it's insane. If you can't sleep safely in your own bed, you've probably made too many enemies. But hey, that's politics, and noble guests aren't all bad. Some are surprisingly kind. You remember Lady Beatrix, who insisted her servants bring extra blankets for the squires when she visited? Or Sir Clement, who invited the stable boys to sit at the edge of the fire while he recited songs from his travels? That man had frostbitten fingers and the voice of a drunk owl, but he knew how to share warmth, and in winter, that's a rare kind of nobility. But Sir Allard is not one of those men. As you make your way back to your chamber, the temporary one, you hear him complain about the suspicious damp patch on the ceiling, and demand a second fire be brought in. A second fire, in a room with one hearth, one window slit, and ventilation only slightly better than a coffin. You almost hope the smoke chokes him out, but then again, the smoke would just come through the cracks and find you. You push open your door, step back into your room, and find it exactly as you left it. Chilly, dim, and undeniably yours. No lace trim, no whining, just the solid, sullen reality of a night's winter chamber. You settle in near the brazier, which has gone out again, no surprise. You poke the coals with a stick, coaxing out a reluctant glow, and feed in some dry twigs from the bundle you've been hoarding like a miser. As the fire begins to breathe again, you stretch out your legs and close your eyes. For all its flaws, this room at least belongs to someone who respects silence. The walls don't echo with nonsense. The fire doesn't have to burn bright to impress anyone. And the bed, lumpy and straw-stuffed though it is, doesn't mind the shape you leave in it. There's a kind of dignity in sleeping without complaint. You've learned it over years of displacements, shared quarters, outdoor nights, and borrowed blankets. You've learned that comfort isn't about perfection. It's about ownership. Knowing the room, the light, the creaks of the floorboards, and the way the wind hums in the wall just before dawn. Knowing that even if it's temporary, this space is yours. Sir Allard can keep your old bed. He'll have his fire and his furs and his complaints. You'll have your peace. And maybe, if the wind's kind and the brazier behaves, you'll sleep better for it. Night falls again without ceremony. No grand sunset, no choir of angels, just a slow dimming of the world, as if someone's pulling a wool blanket over the sky, inch by inch. By the time the last hints of light are gone, the castle has already begun its nightly transformation from a place of work to a place of weary rituals. Doors shut, fires dwindle, the noise of the day fades, replaced by the sound of boots scraping stone and the gentle clatter of bowls being stacked in the kitchens. Somewhere above you someone is singing. Not well and not for anyone in particular. Just singing because, honestly, what else are you going to do? Down here in the lesser quarters, the air has turned colder faster. You can feel it pressing against the walls, creeping through the seams of the door, sliding beneath the uneven floorboards like a rumour. There's no fireplace in this particular chamber, just a clay brazier that's already given up for the evening, its last few embers glowing like tired eyes. You can't blame it. You feel the same. This room, if you can even call it that, is one of the castle's in-between spaces. A servant's nook, repurposed for nights when the guest list gets long. It's narrow, barely wide enough for your bed and a chest, with low ceilings and a draught that seems to have a personal grudge against your ankles, but it's yours for the night. And compared to some of the places you've slept, a hay cart in the rain, a cave full of bats, once even inside a ruined bell tower during a siege, it's not the worst. You settle in with the same routine you've perfected over years of cold nights, cloak around the shoulders, blanket over the knees, second pair of socks if they're not frozen solid from yesterday's patrol. You unstrap your sword and lay it beside you, not too close to roll onto it, but within reach in case something unexpected happens, like a rat invasion or Sir Allard wandering in looking for a better room, again. Then you reach for your secret weapon, the old woolen scarf. It's threadbare, faded, and technically part of your summer kit, but you use it anyway. You wrap it around your neck and wear your face until only your eyes are visible. It doesn't do much, but it makes you feel like you're resisting the cold with a bit of style. You tug your hood over your head and nestle into the straw mattress, which crinkles like an autumn forest floor and smells faintly of onions. And here comes the strange part. Despite the discomfort, despite the cold and the gloom and the occasional sharp object buried in the mattress, you can actually sleep here. Because what you've learned more than anything else is that comfort in the castle doesn't come from the room, it comes from what you make of it. And that's exactly what the servants have mastered. The castle's household staff, scullions, maids, laundry girls, stable hands, cooks, and that terrifying old woman who sharpens all the knives sleep wherever space allows. And somehow they're always warmer than you. You've walked past the kitchens late at night and seen 3 of them curled up together on a bench beside the stove, half covered in flour and completely content. One of the kitchen boys sleeps in a cupboard, not beside a cupboard, in it. He curls up in there like a loaf of bread and swears it's the warmest spot in the building. The laundry maid you once attempted to flirt with sleeps above the laundry itself. Literally. In the attic. Right above the big boiling cauldron where tunics go to die. She says the rising steam keeps her bed warm all night. You don't doubt it. She has clearer skin than any night in the hall. Must be the humidity. There's a particular genius to the way the servants make do. They use fur scraps, old curtains, flour sacks stuffed with straw. One of them made a blanket out of stitched-together rat pelts. Rat pelts. It's horrifying, it's brilliant. You wish you'd thought of it first. They warm stones by the fire and stuff them into their bedding. They have even figured out how to use kitchen grease as a kind of insulation, though the smell leaves something to be desired. They don't sleep in luxury, but they sleep smart. And honestly, that's a skill you respect more than half the noble titles in the land. You tried once to ask a scullion named Beatty how she managed to stay so warm in winter. She just laughed, shoved a hot onion into your hand and walked away. You didn't realise at first that the onion was meant to go in your bed. That night, you tucked it under the covers near your feet, and for one glorious hour it radiated heat like a blessed vegetable candle. The smell? Less ideal. But you'll take onion toes over frostbite. Servants also master the art of sleeping anywhere. During spring planting season, you've seen them passed out on sacks of grain, on stone steps, even balanced across 2 barrels like human planks. You once saw the armoury boy asleep inside a suit of armour, not leaning on it. Inside it, head through the breastplate, legs curled inside the cuisses like some kind of metal womb. He looked peaceful, also stuck. There's a quiet debate among the knights about whether it's better to sleep like a noble, high above, alone, in a private freezing room, or like a servant, buried under 5 people in a cupboard that smells like soup. You used to scoff at the latter. Now, you're not so sure, because tonight, in your temporary room, wrapped in your cloak and scarf and dignity, you're shivering. Not violently, but enough that your teeth are beginning to clink together like dice in a cup. You exhale, watch the cloud of breath drift up into the air, and seriously consider sneaking down to the kitchen hearth like a lost child. Instead, you lean over and dig into the chest beside the bed, pulling out one final item, a worn, faded tunic, too small, too thin, but warm from being folded. You stuff it under the blanket, near your stomach. A trick learned from a stable hand you once drank under the table. He swore the extra layer helped insulate your coral and make you dream of warmer places. He also thought horses could smell lies, so you take his advice with a grain of salt. You lie back, close your eyes, and listen to the silence. Not true silence, of course. There's always something. The distant clank of a bucket, the creak of wood under pressure, the faint moan of wind testing the shutters. But the castle is quiet enough. You wrap yourself tighter and think of the kitchen cupboard. Maybe tomorrow you'll ask Beatty if there's room for 2. You're dreaming about bread. Not glory, not battle, not some poetic vision of your lost youth, just bread. A heavy, dark loaf steaming as it's cracked open, the crust splitting with a soft crunch. You can almost smell it, that rich, nutty scent. Like roasted grain and patience. It's probably rye. The texture in your dream is perfect. Dense, chewy, warm to the core. The kind of thing you could eat in 4 bites but choose to savour because you don't know when you'll taste it again. And then you wake up. The air hits your face like a slap from an ice sculpture. The room is pitch black except for the faintest orange glow from your brazier, which is down to its last miserable coal. Your scarf has slipped. Your feet are cold. And somewhere in the corridor a door slams, followed by muffled cursing and the distinct sound of a wooden bucket tipping over. You sigh. Of course, it's always the good dreams that get interrupted. You sit up, the blanket clinging to your back like a stubborn pet. Every joint in your body protests. Your neck aches from the way you slept. Your spine makes a sound you're not entirely comfortable describing. And your left shoulder, injured years ago by a lance that wasn't supposed to land, has locked up again. A reliable sign that the temperature has dipped somewhere between unpleasant and you're going to regret this in your 40s. Which brings you to a very real, very medieval truth. Sleep in winter hurts. It just does. There's no amount of furs or cloaks or saints' blessings that can fully protect your body from the reality of stone floors, stuffed straw, and the chill that seeps into your joints like gossip into a noble court. Your mattress, if you're feeling generous enough to call it that, is a rough sack stuffed with straw, some of which is clearly older than you are. You've tried everything to soften it, beating it, restuffing it, swapping it with someone else's while they were at chapel. Still it crinkles when you move and manages to jab you in exactly the same rib every night like it holds a grudge. And your pillow? That's not a pillow. That's a rolled up tunic you've folded over itself 3 times and bound with twine. It smells like smoke and armpit, but it's yours. You've had fancier ones during feasts and campaigns in noble manners, but they're always too soft, too feathered, like sleeping on an anxious goose. At least this one supports your neck while it slowly ruins it. You've heard whispers of proper feather beds. Supposedly some castles, wealthy castles, offer entire mattresses filled with goose down, layers of linen, silken covers, headrests stuffed with lavender. But you've only ever seen such a thing once, when accompanying a baron on a peace mission. He let you sit on the edge of his guest bed once as a joke. You sank so deep into the thing that your knees vanished, and you almost dislocated your hip trying to stand again. It was luxurious. It was also a trap. The servants, ironically, often sleep better than the knights. Packed together in warm rooms, bodies piled like firewood, they generate enough shared heat to roast a turnip. Sure, their blankets are rougher, and the smell could knock out a bear, but they sleep. And that in winter is the true measure of wealth. There's an ongoing argument among the castle's inhabitants, debated over fire pits and during long walks to the latrines, about what's worse, waking up freezing or waking up sore. The general consensus is that you can fix soreness with stretching, but cold is a possession. It claims you, lives in you. You don't get rid of it, you just learn to carry it. You glance at the coals and debate whether it's worth trying to stoke them, but your fingers are stiff, and you've already learnt the hard way that poking the brazier in the dark almost always ends with burnt fingertips or a broken pride. You decide to wait. Eventually someone will come through with fresh kindling, or maybe you'll just survive on sheer stubbornness. Again. Shifting in bed brings its own challenges. Every movement is an expedition. You have to realign your cloak, shift the blanket, reposition the rolled up tunic, and then pause, completely still, for exactly 10 seconds, while your body decides whether it's going to cramp or let you get comfortable again. It's like sleeping inside a puzzle. And then the sound begins, the castle cacophony. It starts subtle. Someone coughs in the hallway, then a sneeze from the floor above, then the faint thud of something falling in a distant chamber. A rat squeals. A dog barks once without commitment. Pipes creak. Wind moans in the walls. Somewhere, a person mutters in their sleep, loud enough to be heard, quiet enough that you can't tell what they're saying. The building itself shifts and groans like it's dreaming too, remembering ancient sieges or long-dead kings. And just when it starts to settle again, the bells begin. Not loud, not the big ones, just the small chapel bell. 3 short rings, the signal for the pre-dawn monk's vigil. You're not required to attend, it's mostly for the deeply pious or the deeply punished, but hearing it always jolts something inside you. Not exactly guilt. Just the quiet awareness that another day has begun, and you're not quite ready for it. You lie back, arms crossed over your chest like you're auditioning for a tomb, and stare at the ceiling. In the darkness, it's impossible to tell how far above you it really is. Could be 5 feet, could be 50. Castles have a way of hiding their scale in the dark. Everything feels both larger and smaller than it is. You're just one body in a room inside a wall, inside a fortress, inside a kingdom that doesn't even know you exist. And yet here you are, freezing quietly beneath a wool cloak and dreaming of bread. Maybe that's what survival looks like here. Not epic tales of battle, not songs of glory, just waking up again and again into the cold, dreaming of warmth, of food, of softness, and carrying that dream with you into the next day. You curl a little tighter beneath the blanket. 1 more hour maybe, if you're lucky. If no one opens the door, if the cold lets you, and if not, well, there's always the onion trick. The sound that finally pulls you from your half-sleep isn't the bells or footsteps or some divine revelation. It's your stomach, groaning like an old drawbridge lowering in protest. You open your eyes, or at least you think you do. It's hard to tell in this gloom. The air is thick with that particular morning cold that settles on your skin like a wet shroud. You roll over trying to get comfortable again, but your body has entered the negotiation phase. It will allow no more rest unless you feed it, clothe it properly, and swear an oath not to sleep on straw again for at least a week. It's dramatic, but unfortunately persuasive. You groan and swing your legs over the edge of the bed, bracing yourself for the shock of cold stone. It's worse than you remember. Of course it is. It's always worse. The fall seems to have developed a personal vendetta overnight. You shuffle to the corner where you stashed your boots, now slightly frozen into shape, as if posing for a painting entitled A Night's Regret. You slip them on anyway, hissing between your teeth as the cold leather touches skin. It's a special kind of discomfort, one that instantly makes you nostalgic for the dream about bread. Food. Right. That's the only thing that matters now. You make your way through the corridor, passing other knights and servants emerging like reluctant ghosts from their own chambers. There's a shared expression on everyone's face this morning. A blend of exhaustion, mild confusion, and quiet defeat. Someone mutters a prayer, someone else sneezes into their cloak and nearly topples into the wall. No one looks fully alive. It's the castle morning shuffle, and you're very much a part of it. As you pass the kitchen door, you're met with a familiar smell, wood smoke, salt, and is that onions again? Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be onions? This castle runs on onions. You've joked before that if the castle ever ran out of them, the entire structure would collapse out of spite. But underneath that ever-present scent is something far more important. Bread. Actual warm bread. Your body straightens at the promise of carbs. You step into the kitchen, and the whole blast of heat nearly knocks you backward. It's like walking into summer. The hearth here burns all night. Has to. For baking and boiling and all the other acts of culinary sorcery that keep this place running. The air is thick with steam and the windows are fogged. But you don't care. It's paradise. The cook, a round, scowling woman named Margaret, gives you the same look she always does when knights come sniffing around her territory too early. Equal parts disdain and amusement. She doesn't stop kneading dough, doesn't even pause, just jabs a finger toward a bench near the hearth and growls, "Sit! Don't touch nothing." You obey instantly, everyone does. Margaret has more power than the steward, the captain of the guard, and possibly the lord himself when it comes to this domain. She once hit a visiting baron with a ladle because he tried to take bread before it cooled. He apologised, in writing. The bench is warm, not just warm, heavenly. It's been positioned perfectly to catch the heat from both the hearth and the great bread oven. Someone has already occupied one end, one of the scullions, curled up with a hunk of stale loaf in one hand and a bucket beside him that may or may not have been his pillow. You nudge his foot with yours. He doesn't stir. You envy his peace. Margaret finally tosses you a small loaf. It's still hot, the crust crackling as you catch it. You break it open and the steam pours out in glorious waves. You don't wait. You tear a chunk off and pop it into your mouth, burning your tongue but refusing to care. It's simple, just flour, water and salt, but when you've spent your night shivering in a glorified stone box, it tastes like victory. While you eat, you listen. The kitchen hums with energy. Cooks shuffle pans, water hisses as it hits hot iron. Someone's peeling root vegetables with the speed of a desperate man. There's laughter in the corner, a small argument near the larder, and the unmistakable sound of someone being told they forgot to salt the porridge again. This kitchen isn't just where food is made. It's where the castle breathes. In the dead of winter, it's one of the few places where warmth and noise and motion exist all at once. Even the cats seem drawn to it. 2 of them lounge near the hearth, barely opening an eye as boots step around them. They know their royalty here. And in this moment, you begin to understand something you've only half noticed before. While the knights and nobles grumble about drafts and cold sheets, The kitchen staff has built a world down here. A world of warmth, of motion, of shared labour, and quiet comfort. No one is pretending it's easy. No one is pretending they're happy to be awake at this hour, but they're alive, fully, stubbornly alive, and that's something. There's a story you heard once about a knight who froze to death just outside a castle, mere yards from the kitchen. They say he was on patrol and too proud to admit he needed warmth. He made it back to the gate but never stepped inside. Froze standing up. Some say he was found with one hand on his sword, others say he was clutching a stale biscuit from his pack. Either way, the lesson is clear. Pride doesn't warm your toes. You take another bite of bread, letting it soften the sharp edges of the morning. You're not proud today, you're just cold and grateful, and maybe a little jealous of the scullion still snoring against the wall. Eventually, the cook waves a spoon at you and jerks her head toward the door. Time to gay you nod, mouth full, and rise from the bench slowly, trying to store every ounce of warmth in your bones before stepping back into the frost-bitten corridors of duty. As the kitchen door closes behind you, you feel the cold wrap around your legs again, tugging at your cloak like a needy child. But you walk a little straighter now, stomach full, fingers warm, the memory of the fire tucked under your skin like a secret. Let the castle creak and groan and whisper through its winter bones. You've had your bread. You'll survive the night. You make your way back through the castle with a kind of slow, grounded peace that only a hot loaf of bread and a near-lethal kitchen scolding can provide. Your body is still cold, sure, but the edge has dulled, and more importantly, your mind feels steadier. Food does that, stabilises something inside you that warmth alone can't reach. And now, as you trudge across the uneven flagstones, past the storage rooms and half-frozen wash basins, you start to notice things again. Small things. The flutter of a moth caught in a window slit. The way the frost has crept up the inside of the hallway walls in delicate fern-like patterns. The muffled laughter of two squires arguing over who gets to wear the slightly less wet pair of hose. You turn down a quieter passage. One of those ancient side halls that no one really uses anymore, except maybe for avoiding eye contact or crying in peace. And you pause at a worn stone niche in the wall. It's barely noticeable. A little alcove that once held a statue, probably a saint, now long gone. But someone, maybe a servant, maybe a noble's bored child, has turned it into a tiny shrine. There's a half-burnt candle stub, a dry sprig of rosemary, and something that might be a button from a lady's cloak. It's not official, not sanctioned by the monks, but it's clearly loved. A place where someone asks for help in private, for warmth, for strength, for anything, and you get it. These moments, the quiet, the stillness, the little rituals tucked into the stone, these are the anchors in the long winter nights, when the cold isn't just around you but inside you, not just in your hands or your bones, but in your thoughts, when you start to wonder if spring is real or just a collective hallucination passed down through generations of frostbitten optimism. You keep walking, steps soft now. The castle feels asleep mostly. The corridors are emptier. A few yawning servants pass you without speaking. Somewhere a single harp note rings out and fades. You know where it's coming from, Lady Celine's chamber. She plays in the early hours, always the same drifting tune. She says it's for the Virgin, but it always sounds more like a lullaby for herself. You've stood beneath her window in warmer months and listened to it blend with the sound of birds waking up. Now it echoes cold off the walls. Eventually you reach one of your favourite places. It's technically just a storage room, unused and drafty, with cracked mortar and an old archer's arrow slot sealed off by a shutter. But years ago someone dragged a bench inside, a real one, with a back and everything. Maybe they meant to repair it. Maybe they were just tired. Either way, it stayed. And in winter, this spot becomes a kind of sanctuary. Not quite private, not quite public, just still. You sit, cloak wrapped tight, hands tucked into your sleeves. The light through the shutter is thin but gold, painting a streak across the stone floor that shifts ever so slightly as the sun rises. You close your eyes, just for a moment. You think about all the places you've slept over the years, under carts, in tree roots, against barn doors, in tents that flapped so loudly in the wind you swore they were possessed. You've slept with your sword in your hand, with rocks under your back, with other knights snoring like war drums beside you. Once, even in the lap of a weeping widow who refused to let go of you until dawn. You don't talk about that one. And here, in a castle that both protects and punishes you with its stone heart, you've learned to accept that sleep isn't a destination. It's a negotiation. You give a little comfort, you give a little dignity, and in return you get rest. Of a kind. There's a popular story told around hearths in the coldest weeks of the year, about the knight who never slept. Supposedly, he feared dreaming would allow demons into his mind, so he stayed awake, night after night, pacing the halls, drinking bitter herbs, muttering prayers to ward off sleep. The tale always ends the same way. He either dies from madness or falls asleep standing up and never wakes. No one remembers which version came first. Either way, it's a warning. You used to laugh at it. Now you understand the fear behind it. In winter, dreams feel closer to the edge. The veil between sense and imagination thins. You've had dreams so vivid they stuck with you for days. Visions of summer fields, of warm water, of fires that didn't burn out. You once woke up clutching your own hand as if it belonged to someone else. It's not madness. Not yet. It's just the toll of the season. Some people write letters to endure the cold, others embroider, or carve little figurines from scraps of wood. One knight you know spends his nights organising pebbles by size and colour. Says it gives his hand something to do and keeps the shadows from talking. You used to think it's strange, now you just think it's smart. Your ritual is simpler. You listen. Every night before bed you stop, you listen to the castle, to its creaks and sighs, to the shuffle of feet, to the wind moving through the walls like a spirit not quite ready to leave. It reminds you that you're not alone in this, that hundreds of others are here, wrapped in their own layers of discomfort and quiet perseverance, breathing the same cold air, dreaming of the same firelight. Outside, the wind picks up again. You hear it moan through the upper halls, brushing past shuttered windows, rattling loose stones. Somewhere a door creaks open, and then slams shut. The castle stirs. Another day has officially begun, though the sun still hasn't fully committed to rising. You rise slowly, limbs stiff, but your heart is a little steadier. You'll return to your duties now. Training. Watch. Maybe escort duty if some merchant arrives with a late delivery of salted fish and grievances. But tonight, when you return to your straw and your scarf and your stubborn freezing bed, you'll know this. You've done this before, and you'll do it again. Because this is what it means to be a knight in winter. You survive the cold, not in spite of it, but with it. And then it's night again. The sun, such as it was, gave up around mid-afternoon, slipping behind a wall of grey clouds with all the enthusiasm of a sulking child. You watched it vanish from the training yard while trying to stay upright on a frost-slicked patch of ground. Now your legs ache. Your shoulders protest every movement, and your fingers have gone through the entire cycle of numb, tingly, aching, and back to numb. Again. This is the last lightless stretch of the day, the time when the castle seems to forget it's inhabited. The corridors are near silent. Fires are dying down. Most have gone to sleep or are trying to, lost in their own little nests of straw, wool and dreams they won't remember. But you're still awake, not out of duty, not even out of restlessness. Just waiting. Your bed is there, same as always. A sad stack of flattened straw, your cloak twisted into a sorry excuse for a headrest, and a blanket that smells faintly of smoked meat, possibly because someone once used it to carry smoked meat. The brazier beside you has offered its last glowing ember in tribute to the cold. You could try to relight it, but you've learnt there's a point at which the act becomes more exhausting than the chill. So instead, you sit up in bed, legs pulled to your chest, arms wrapped tight. The stone wall behind you is cold enough to store fish. Outside your narrow window slit, the wind howls. Not a scream, not tonight, just a steady moan, like something old and tired dragging itself through the battlements. And there it is, the sound. You hear it every night, though never at the same time. It's not loud, not obvious, just there. A faint scraping, a thud, a door creaking that shouldn't. Somewhere, someone moving when they shouldn't be. You've told yourself it's the wind, or a rat, or one of the castle cats returning from its nightly hunt with frozen paws and questionable morals. But deep down you wonder. Because in a castle this old, something always lives in the walls. Maybe not ghosts, not exactly, but memories that never left. You feel them in the cracks, in the footsteps that echo where no one walks, in the cold breath that slides across your skin even when the window is shut. People say you can't sleep well through a siege. You say people who believe that have never tried to sleep before a siege, because that's what tonight feels like, stillness before a storm, the sort of quiet that doesn't last. The kind that presses on your chest while you lie there, listening, waiting for something to go wrong. And not just outside, you've seen the signs. Supplies locked tighter, guards posted with less banter and more blade, nobles whispering behind closed doors, always glancing over their shoulders. You've heard the talk of unrest in the region, of smaller keeps falling silent. Nothing official, nothing confirmed, but you can feel it, like the way animals feel thunder before it comes. Which makes this night different. Because sleeping through the cold is one thing. Sleeping through tension, real, heavy, almost breathable tension, that's another art entirely. You lie down, pull the blanket up to your chin, and position your sword within reach. It's the little rituals that keep you sane. That. And a stubborn belief that being horizontal is at least trying to sleep, even if your brain is sprinting laps around the castle roof. You think about the squires. You wonder if Thomas is asleep. Probably not. The boy breathes like a charging ox when he's out, and you haven't heard it yet. You imagine him curled up beside the hearth, maybe with that weird little dog he insists isn't his. You hope he's warm, you hope he's dreaming about something other than armor maintenance. You think about the other knights too. Some are snoring. One definitely talks in his sleep. Last week, he proposed marriage to a wheel of cheese. Another grinds his teeth so loudly that you can hear it through the walls, like he's fighting ghosts in his jaw. And then you think about the ones who don't make noise at all. The ones who lie so still it makes you wonder if they sleep with their eyes open. You've met those men, they've seen things, done things, cold doesn't bother them anymore. Neither does fear or dreams. You're not sure if you envy them or pity them. Your own mind drifts again to strange places. It always does this when it's too quiet. You remember your first winter in a castle like this? Smaller, rougher, hungrier. You remember crying quietly into your cloak, pretending it was because of the smoke in the room. You remember dreaming of your mother's hands pulling a blanket over you, even though you hadn't seen her in years. You don't dream of her much now. Now you dream of sunlight, of heat, of the way your shoulders used to not hurt. You dream of deep baths and clean linen, and beds so soft they erase the shape of your body. But mostly, you dream of spring, not just the season, the idea. That impossible notion that one day you'll walk outside and the air won't bite your face. That the world will bloom just because it can. That the cold you've carried for months will finally decide to leave. You roll over, blanket pulled tight, scarf up over your mouth. You've survived another day, another night, another cold, sleepless, aching passage of time. And even if sleep doesn't come easily, even if it feels more like drifting in and out of consciousness than rest, you're still here. Still warm enough to keep going, still sane enough to hope for better. Still you. And in a castle like this, that might just be the greatest victory of all. And now, the castle sleeps again, the wind outside has softened to a whisper. A tired hush curling around the turrets and slipping beneath doorways like an old friend saying goodnight. The fire in the great hall has sunk into a bed of glowing coals, and every step echoes a little louder. Every breath feels a little deeper. The castle is resting, not in peace perhaps, but in rhythm. The slow, practiced rhythm of another night survived. You're beneath your blanket now, breath warm against the wool, body curled instinctively toward the warmest parts of itself. The stone beneath you is still hard, the mattress still stubborn, but your limbs are finally too tired to care. The ache is familiar, almost comforting in its constancy. It tells you you're still here, still fighting the cold, still dreaming of spring. Somewhere above you, a shutter bangs softly in the wind. Somewhere below, a servant coughs once in their sleep and falls quiet again. Even the rats are still, even the ghosts, and as your eyes drift closed, you carry with you all the little victories of the night. A warm crust of bread, a borrowed patch of sunlight, the soft sound of someone else's fire burning behind a half-closed door. That's the secret no one ever tells you about surviving a medieval winter in a castle. It's not about heroics. It's about collecting moments, sparks, holding them close night after night like kindling, until eventually the cold lets go, not all at once, but enough. So sleep now quietly, you've earned it, and whatever tomorrow brings, frost or fire, you'll meet it wrapped in every small warmth you've gathered here.